Okay, so it is 6:02 and I will call the meeting to order. The first order of business tonight is actually a little different because we're starting early. It's going to be the Select Board retreat. And the facilitator for that is going to be our town manager, Eric. So Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you everyone and good evening. So I sent out some materials before the meeting and I was able to print a couple more hard copies of, I think we're calling it the planning continuum, if anyone wants a hard copy. I was trying to print one for everyone and then we ran out of paper. So that's the way things are going the last one. But I've got another one too if anyone else wants. So there's just a couple hard copies that we'll share. I printed another one too. So I worked on this with Paul Dickin, a resident in town here who does organizational management and planning, to kind of come up with some thoughts on just ways to frame the conversation. And this is the board's planning session, so if anything sounds like let's do this a different way or don't like this approach, we'll go whatever direction you want to go with. But this is a starting point. So we looked at what we've done the last few years with the policy priorities list. We did an update for that a couple meetings ago. And we've thought about, there's some things there that are kind of ongoing at this point. And I guess to start with, if we look at kind of the large planning continuum document, that's where Paul and I spent some time to try to think, how could we visualize this for a planning exercise in a little bit of a different manner? And then this will inform the next iteration of what we've done the last couple of years, and thinking more about kind of a calendar basis on that as well to help plan out the board work plan year. So we can pull those action items that need staff work and board work and kind of plug them into your calendar for the year more, so we have some just timelines of where we're working on certain things. The year gets driven a lot by money, so the budget process, setting the tax rate, that's relatively minor in your business load, but really the budget review takes quite a bit of time. So what we looked at here, so we came up with different categories and we had some starter names for them to try to think of, as you're working on projects and policy priorities, kind of how does that go from we're thinking about doing this to yes, let's work on this, to we're really working on this, it's active, to now it's happening and we might just need to be consulted on an as needed basis as a select board, as a policy making board. So that's where we went with this kind of first block was identified. Items that are identified in some policy documents by the select board. That could be town plan items. There's the top 20 actions priority list I shared just to have a copy with the board. That was talked about during the town plan adoption process, but certainly the board could pull anything from the town plan and say, we want to prioritize this for the coming year, staff, please work on this, put this on the front burner. We have the previous policy goals list. I tried to incorporate a lot of what was on that list into this document, and you also have just a sheet that shows those projects by category here, and the latest and greatest update on them. So you go from those identified lists, and there's also, part of for this evening is, are there items that aren't identified anywhere here that the board wants to make a priority, and where does the board place that for the next year? A lot of this is trying to figure out, I think in the end, are there kind of 3 to 5 really big policy work goals for the select board to help direct staff that will help Aaron and I with managing assistance the manager's office needs to oversee for those projects to move forward. If it's not just the manager's office staff time working on it, is there other departments, are there other boards and commissions of yours that you have as policy advisory groups that would need to be involved in this to help set their work plans? It kind of sets the year in place from the select board of what you want to accomplish from March to March is kind of how we've done it from election to election. So that's the identified block. The discover block, we define that as this is really the critical area of the work plan to shape the next year. There are items previously identified with direction to staff to work on them, like I put in like the short-term rental ordinance that was discussed by the board a month or 2 ago. And so prioritizing these that are really in a development stage really help with that work plan for the year, I think, just working from this list and what this list encompasses here. So then the next block is the active block. These are things that are underway. The board's given direction to proceed on these items that tend to be multi-step with multi-years with decision points from the board along the way. So some examples of that are the radio communications tower project. We received the certificate of public good this past year. We're currently working to get a technical advisory consultant on board to help with that and refine the budget for that and have further discussions with capital planning for that project. So we're working on it. We got the permitting, the location done, but now we're into the design and money part of that project. The Verizon repeater at the police station, we're currently working on the lease negotiation with Verizon for that project. The recreation master plan and updated impact fees, that master plan should be coming to the board in June for your discussion. The rec committee is working on that back and forth with the consultant. Once that is adopted, then the discussion about rec impact fees and capital planning for that master plan can occur later this year. And then our ongoing, too, when we had the Baker report done a couple years ago, is the department service delivery from the police department and that plan implementation. And we're working through some transition in police department leadership coming up in the short term and working to look at what the longer term implementation is for that. So that's the active bucket. And then we came up with, kind of calling it sponsorship. And this one has the revote for the Library Village Green project coming up this year, this month. But that's one where if that project is moving forward, staff would be working to go to the construction phase of that project, working with the final design advisory committee at that point. There's permitting, construction, bidding, and all those things to build the project. There may be occasional check back in with the select board as needed, especially for bond sale, things of that nature. But kind of the real project development has gotten to this build it standpoint, I guess, for a better term for that project. So we tried to divide it up into these different buckets, and then we also came up with the ongoing town operational items, kind of things that are ongoing, that are more kind of categorical, kind of a larger policy level that didn't necessarily need to be, we did it, we developed it, we're done, but they're more longer range goals and planning and other things that just kind of occur during operations a bit more. Then we try to have an idea of what are the sources of truth, what are the primary sources to inform these processes, the town plan, then our governance charter, past process and policy goals. And I should also mention the board has a number of ordinances and policies, and we try to get to updating these, but it's been several years for some of these as well. So that's a good exercise to be thinking about on an annual basis. I'm just gonna
Sources of truth, that seems so biblical.
Yeah, it was. That was a Paul.
What is truth?
Yeah. Philosophical. But so I'll just pause there. That's kind of what we discussed for you to be thinking out as a potential framework. It could be, you like it, you don't like it, let's do something different, but I think the real focus for your planning is kind of that discover bucket, kind of what are we moving up forward on this continuum over the next year, what would you like to see get done? So I'll pause there. Questions, comments, thoughts, anything different that you'd like to do to proceed this evening?
No, I think it's helpful. That's one thing I struggle with is, you come up with something, police department service delivery and plan implementation. That's not a good one because we probably do need to do work on that one, but Verizon repeater. Is that something we need to spend a lot of time on, or we just know it's working on, but we don't want to drop it? So I think these would all be, they're not black and white, where you put them, but I think it's a good way to keep it in mind is we don't have to do new work on this. We're doing a check-in to make sure it's on track or something like that.
Thoughts by the board? Do you like this to kind of continue kind of with this structure for now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think I would look next, I've included for you by category. Everything that's listed here has its own box. So kind of discover, the first one's new park, community center, and growth center. The update for that. Ongoing reviewing possible sites, and then for the new town park and community center. With Allenbrook, there's a wetlands issue there, so we're doing some staff work looking at that, looking at other potential sites. That's kind of an ongoing thing. There may be an update for the board coming up on that. But there has to be a decision point at some juncture with Allenbrook around the school and other areas. I won't go through all of them, but another Big one below that is the growth center infrastructure and the use of TIF and CHIP. Started some of those discussions about CHIP last meeting. Had the special meeting in June to really hear the report on the TIF study component of that, and thinking more about that infrastructure rollout in Taft Corners. That's a pretty big one, I'd say, of the weight of things, of the impact and the time potentially. And that's something we have penciled in coming up in June. But I won't go through each one. I guess I'll kind of leave it for the board. You know, certainly if you have questions or want me to go through each one, I can. These are some things I put in here at first start that you've talked about the last couple of years. If there's anything that is missing from, I think overall what's identified, what you want in the discover bucket, that's probably a place to start. From town plan goals, from things that aren't on any list that anyone's discussed so far. I would look for, you know, consensus of the board, probably what makes up these lists, and then how do you want to prioritize some top things, if that's a good way to shape it here.
I had the one item that kind of is not in the discover phase, but does tie in with the sustainable budget, was, and I think Jean touched on it a few times during our budget kind of review, was a more in-depth look at kind of all of our capital needs and all of our capital equipment and everything. My thought would be, you know, with the cost of inflation and many variables which we cannot control, you know, healthcare costs and things like that right now, I would love to see a really thorough review take this year to look at all of our capital equipment and needs, and see if there are ways that we can extend the life of things we have. If, you know, if something's being replaced 6 years, can we replace it every 7 years, 8 years? You know, do a cost analysis of repairing it and things like that in that time, and see what makes more sense. But really take a hard look at that stuff, because I would love to see us work towards as close to a level funded budget as is possible, given, again, you know, all of these other global and national economic distressors. So that's something I would like to see added.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts on capital and kind of what that looks like from other board members?
Well, I guess tying into that, when things do need to be replaced, I thought I saw it in here somewhere, you know, converting to electric vehicles whenever possible. That would be one of my top priorities to see.
And I can share this with you, Hugh. We had a consultant come in and kind of help us prioritize those replacements as well, help inform that in the planning moving forward.
Okay.
So I kind of went through the top 20 actions and to see if we're missing any, and I did have a couple. The first one was the very first one on the top 20 actions, which is seek broad representation on town boards and committees by engaging and encouraging participation from individuals with diverse backgrounds and experiences. And I kind of went, you know, what does that mean? What does that look like? But underneath that 1.2, there's one that I think is very actionable now that Susan's on board, which is to develop robust onboarding and maintenance training programs around inclusion for staff and board members. And I think that would be very doable for our new HR director. So I'd like to see that. I don't know where you put that in categories. You can worry about that later.
We've had some conversations about rolling that training out to staff this year.
Yeah, good. I just think that that's something that we should not ignore.
I would say too, any public facing, like all of our boards are very public facing and engaging with the community, and so I think it's really important that.
Yeah, I think it actually calls out boards and volunteers and employees. So I like the fact that it was not just our employees; it's everybody. It represents the town. This one would be just maybe this one doesn't need to be its own standalone thing, but it bothers me that we haven't figured out how to fund the Housing Trust Fund. Poked around a couple things, but I don't know when we have that conversation, but we probably should at least acknowledge the fact that we haven't figured out how to fund it and have a
And
discussion.
Same with the Environmental Reserve Fund too, I think.
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
probably
that's one
continue
of the
that
goals as
conversation.
well.
I never understood why they don't want it to be a separate vote, but if that's important to them for some reason, we should probably have those, we could do those before the budget's ready, you know, we could
Yeah.
kind of do some budget philosophy kind of discussions, I think.
Would that be, you know, potential, just like the staff work behind that? Like, would there look and see some different methodologies for the board to think about for funding streams and present those, you know, to the board? Say, hey, here's how we found some other communities do it. Here's some ideas we have.
That'd be
What's your
helpful.
thoughts on
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
potential
Absolutely.
options? Okay.
Because, I mean, to that point, one of the pieces of feedback I feel like we get pretty frequently is that we're, you know, we're not as proactive as we could be, and we're more reactive, and I feel like that would be a good, you know, place to look at, being like, no, we do care about these things, and here's how we're going to fund them, instead of every year after the budget's ready.
And there's nothing more solid than that extra vote to me, but if they want to risk it.
I know,
by
I know.
throwing it
Well, and
into the
that's,
budget,
that
they can.
was a little bit my point last year, was like, you know, if we're worried the budget may pass, not
Yeah.
pass, like, I'm less worried that this won't pass. Like,
Exactly.
you might get your funding, we might not, but.
And then the last one was, and it may be kind of on here, it was number 15 on the top 20 list, is to create a bike ped plan and fund it. I know we have multimodal on here, but bike multi-use plan infrastructure, but in the status update, it only talks about the UPWP. So I wasn't sure, but it was a comprehensive, I mean, like, it's like the village sidewalk is a disaster and needs to be fixed, you know? So there are things like that that are not the $4 million Route 2 project. They're just, you know, in the filling in the gaps and all that kind of stuff, so.
Yeah, I know I checked in with planning staff on that last week, so we had some, I think it's on the UPWP approved list, it's just waiting for the CCRPC board to approve it. So my indication was it looked good for it to be funded.
And it was for the whole, it was like the whole town, it wasn't just a single project, right?
Right,
It
yeah, kind of
occurs to me that you may not know all these acronyms.
UPW. I'm getting there. I'm putting, yeah, little notes.
The upwith.
Yeah, I was like, there was like a lot of acronyms around. I was like, oh,
That was a lot.
who knows all of these?
That was impressive.
The
Thanks, Greta.
UPWP, that becomes an annual funding from our Regional Planning Commission that we provide a local match for really transportation and planning-based projects. So the town submits application in January, the board approves it, planning and DPW staff recommend various projects. Then the RPC board makes a final decision of all the requests for the county, and then around this time, we see what has been funded, and then those projects start in the new fiscal year. So this plan was to, with our bond wrapping up for the sidewalk bond, and it's been talked about for a few years, what's our kind of next step from master planning, bike ped work. Public Works has been filling in gaps and getting grants for several years, but a couple years ago, I asked them to start providing that update as part of the capital update. So the Planning Commission and the Select Board can see what progress they've made on those projects. And this would really be a comprehensive look town-wide about where the priorities are going to be investing in that public infrastructure moving forward. The funding for this would get that plan put together, and it becomes a implementation discussion that blends in the capital planning for the Select Board.
It's not part of the top 20 or anything like that, but I am getting people calling me about the Nature Trail Bridge by Williston Central. Nobody's said it in these terms, but it's beginning to feel like the Cirque Highway.
Yeah, I know we're hoping to be able to get that permitting where, was it the issues of you can only work in the stream a certain time of year, you can only cut down trees that are bat habitat a certain time of year. and the two things weren't exactly lining up. So we're trying to get a waiver to be in the water at a certain time. I can't remember how David explained it the other day, but it's challenging and unfortunate that it's
Yeah.
taking this long with these permitting regimes.
Yeah, I'm just, I'm always surprised at the number of people that talk to me on the bike path about that.
I can't believe it's been 3 years, three,
Yeah.
4 years. Yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah.
I used to use that all the time to go on the
Yeah.
trail back there.
Yeah.
Has there been a study done to consider an alternative spot for that bridge besides where it is now?
I believe that's part of what they looked at. I'll
Yeah.
double check on that.
Okay.
I think the cost was much more, but
Yeah.
I know part of the planning was they want to make sure we don't fix this bridge, then we have another storm event.
Right.
We're in the same
Right.
boat a few years,
Yeah.
hopefully many years from now.
Yeah.
I'll follow up on it.
Okay, that'd be great.
I know I'm monopolizing, but I have two more. One is the Catamount Outdoor Family Center building. Be somewhere.
Thought of that after we met.
I know. It was pretty funny. It was the last time I lived. It's like Eric's gonna give me a hard time. And the last one, just the one I keep bringing up, is maybe it's in the works, but developing or reviewing some ordinances to maintain livability in our neighborhoods, which can now build high-density housing where once they could not.
Can I ask about the Catamount?
Yeah.
Is it the existing building?
They want to build a building.
They want to build a new building there? Okay.
Yeah. And they're gonna fundraise it and everything, but it would be on our property and probably be our building, so.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's,
Oh, that'd
it's
be nice.
complicated. Yeah, it's a cool project.
Yeah.
A little complicated.
We've been having a working group, and Gene serves for the select board on the Catamount Advisory Committee. So Gene, myself, our conservation planner, David, and Catamount board member and Catamount executive director have been meeting bi-weekly since February.
Oh, wow.
So we've done some work planning earlier today and kind of looking at the trajectory of this pathway for this project and what the select board need to be involved in coming up.
Neat.
Gene, when you said, I didn't catch the part of what you said for the housing piece, ordinance to maintain.
Livability in our neighborhoods?
Livability.
Livability, yeah.
Livability.
It is now the fact that you can build a 4-unit townhouse on any property in the sewer system that has a building on it.
Kind of tying into the potential short-term rental ordinance, kind of non-open.
No, this is more like what they did with the village ordinances 6 months ago or whatever, to say like, you can't put all your garbage cans here, or you have to, they had some
Oh, okay.
density
More,
related.
okay.
Yeah, it's density related ordinances for mostly our older and more affordable neighborhoods that would like to keep them to be lovely neighborhoods and not a lot of conflict between longtime people who live there and families and bigger developments that are going to be hard to squeeze into a 3rd-acre lot.
So that'd be kind of along the lines of, potential quality of life nuisance items that, kind of more of a code enforcement type of.
Well, no, I don't think it's code enforcement. I mean, I'm really just going back to the village ordinances that we reviewed. It had to do with you need to have the garbage cans covered, and they need to be, that's the one just came to my mind, where fences are and where you can park cars and
Okay.
how many, it was very much focused on high-density living and making that work. And I just think we need to get ahead of it before somebody realizes they can tear down a nice family home and lamplight and put up a 4-unit condo.
And some of those things in other neighborhoods, like an HOA regulates, and these neighborhoods tend to not have HOA, so it's kind of.
Right, yeah, it's very much a non-HOA, one that's a problem, yeah.
I think Matt said that doing something similar for the residential zoning district was kind of,
Yeah, like I said,
On-
it might be in the
but-
pipeline, but I don't want to lose track of it.
yes.
I think we will regret it if we don't.
My only other kind of big one, which kind of ties in with the clean heat standard, which I do see as high priority, There's a lot of kind of projects that tie into our energy committee and our town energy plan that are in pieces, solar canopies or EV chargers or LED lighting in all of our buildings, or the clean heat standard, things like that. And we also have all of these kind of master plans being developed and things like that. So I would really like to see, the energy committee, one coming to us. I don't feel like we've heard from them very often. And, getting some updates on kind of their work, but also really making some progress on some of these things. And where are we, or are we not making progress? Is there things that, we can be doing to push forward some of these things?
And one thing we're in the process on that, we're running into some furnace replacement in the police station. And we just got some specs that we can replace them with hybrid heat pump systems over there.
Great.
So we're working to get the final contract set for that one.
Yeah.
That'll be a good addition.
Well, and thinking of like the park master plan, that's ongoing, is the energy committee, they've been like consulting on ways in which, we can, add in, things that meet some of our town energy plan goals, as part of the master plan. I feel like that anytime we're considering these projects, we should be consulting with, that committee and really, seeing, what boxes or goals it's checking.
Yeah, they have been involved with the library project.
Yeah, I did know
it's
that
gonna be
one.
good.
There's been a lot of consultation, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I've got all those notes from the board. We have on the Discover tab here. Is there anything else that we should name just for like list development that we can talk about? Okay, what do we do with this list in the next 10 months or so?
Well, I got one more to add. The transit station, is there still talk on that? The one piece of property that we have in Taft's Corners, to convert that into a possible transit station?
Yeah, we did a preliminary scoping, I think it was a UPWP project a couple of years ago, that the town owns that land in Maple Tree Place around the stormwater pond adjacent to Shaw's there.
Yeah.
We've held it for years and kind of thought, okay, what may the town want to do with this? We haven't done anything beyond that kind of initial scope, kind of a bus stop mode shift facility idea a couple of years ago. So we got to the select board, in terms of town projects. Is that something you want to look at further? As a work plan item, where does that go against other facility type projects?
Right.
Overall, for that land use, does the town want to do anything with that property right now? Hold on to it, potentially flip it for something else in the future, all types of things the town could do.
Yeah, okay.
Hey, we're putting our EV chargers on there, you can't get rid of it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But that does tie into like the greater issues of transportation, and that was, obviously a hot topic last year, and cuts that have been made, and kind of saving some of the public transit pieces that we see is really important to our community members. So.
Yeah, the tough part always is there's no lack of good projects.
No.
They're all interesting and exciting. So, want me to read those back, unless there's any last ones to add right now? So what I have is doing some in-depth look at our capital needs and equipment, doing a full look there of what our life is on our assets there, and also just thinking about kind of revamping our capital plan and presentation and digging into that a bit coming up for the budget. Doing some training around inclusion for all staff and volunteers, all public-facing positions. Doing some thinking about housing trust fund and an ERF and how the ongoing funding models could look like, with some policy decisions by the board to be thinking about pre-budget development. That's probably more like a September-ish type discussion. Bike ped master planning, infrastructure planning, Catamount building plan, ordinance work to maintain livability in neighborhoods, especially older stock housing neighborhoods. Energy committee, interfacing with the select board with some updates on its work and some progress in areas around the energy plan, but also kind of thinking, I think part of that could be what's kind of the energy-based project, whether it's additional solar, whether it's additional facility project. If that group just has a discussion with the select board, could help kind of guide where that goes, if there's kind of like a larger initiative or goal, or if it's more of lots of sprinkles in different areas of town operations too. See how that goes and progresses and what you as a board want to do. And then project work, thinking about the future of the Maple Tree Place parcel, potential transit hub there, and where the board wants to prioritize additional work and scoping and developing that project. With that.
I mean, if you think that the sidewalk one is covered under the CCR's PC one, you could strike that out.
Okay, yeah, I think it's covered well
Yeah,
there.
okay. Yeah.
So I'll just say this list quickly for folks listening at home. What we have in the written document, the growth center infrastructure and use of TIF for CHIP, we've kind of teed that up for a beginning discussion in June of this year. Talking about the park master plan, community center, and the growth center. We'll be talking about the park master planning in June. And the community center is kind of an ongoing one with the town manager tasked to look at potential sites for the future for that. So that's kind of happening, but not potentially a huge lift for the board unless there's an update coming up there. Multi-use path, that's with the UPWP. Anticipate we'll see some funding there, and that would kick off, and that would be an FY27 project. We've talked about a clean heat standard ordinance. We haven't picked that up in a little bit, and we can certainly focus efforts on that, where the board wants to land with that work. That's part of the Energy Committee's and Planning Commission's work, potentially moving forward. Short-term rental ordinance, that was discussed by the board a couple months ago, direction to make that a priority. Have some good feedback from our managers conference last week from Stowe and Woodstock, who both put these in place, and there were different stories from each community, and there's some good example stuff out there, feedback out there for working on that. Overall code enforcement in town, it's been something we've talked about for a few years, the planning level and the fire department level. We're getting to a point in town where we might need to think about more formal building code and building code enforcement. Not quite a full build out of that, but we have talked about some staff working group around that. We talked to our attorney a little bit about it, kind of what makes sense for Williston moving forward with those elements there. So that's a potential kind of really something that would take a little bit of time to develop. Staff would need to be doing some work on some models of what makes sense for Williston, and then the presentation to the board, kind of what we found out and potential next steps and for moving forward with ordinance around some building code. The opioid settlement funds, we've had that on our list of things to do. They're there. We're still receiving payments. They're going in a designated fund. There's some feedback how other towns have utilized those. Those potential uses could blend in some other goals as well, and what the uses are allowed for. So it's a funding source we have available. We just haven't had a board discussion in depth about what we want to do with that funding. It's not going away. We have it. It's in an account. It's there, but kind of how we want to prioritize when we do those discussions. Yeah, then the budget and capital planning. So it's a pretty good list, I'd say. And from that, you see there's some project work, there's some policy work. For the board's direction, if we were to think of 3 to 5 things, like these are real big goals. We really want to see some progress on these in the next year, and how we build that into a schedule here.
Well, first of all, I always have to say, this is like where I started, it's like it's hard for me to figure out, like I think the training program's super important. I don't think it's going to take up a lot of select board time.
No.
Right, so some of these are different, balancing that way. I would say probably the TIF CHIP project is the biggest one for me that we need to make some progress on.
I agree. I also think a sustainable budget and kind of the capital, is something that, our budgeting concerns are not going to go away or get miraculously better. So I think, we really need to take a hard look at that.
Is there consensus among the full board on those two?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other one that kind of feels like a standalone thing, I mean, like Housing Trust Fund, ERF is kind of part of budgeting, so, but the one that seems a little bit standalone is the Park Community Center discussion, and I think every day we don't have a plan that allows us to, collect funds for that. What's the name? I always forget. When people build a new house and they have to pay towards impact fees, yeah. And every time we're not, going after impact fees for things that are costing us money for new growth. So, and again, there's not a whole lot the select board's going to do except the report. So, but I would hate for us to go a whole nother year and not go through that, especially how it impacts the whole rec plan.
And we are still collecting rec impact fees right now, but that would revise the fee structure, and we could probably increase that fee structure based on what we find.
Yep.
I'm just in my notes going to add housing and ERF to kind of overall budget planning block here as a component of that.
I think if we're gonna add things and combine things a little bit, I would add the multi-use path infrastructure and the walkability and bikeability to the kind of the town kind of community, goals. If people can't access our existing facilities, it makes a tougher case for building new facilities.
Does that kind of become town infrastructure master planning?
I think
Almost?
so,
I'm trying to get
yeah.
rid of define it a little bit. If we're talking parks, community center, bike ped connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
Those are three kind of real project-based components. I think staff's got a good handle on kind of those pieces and updates to the board with decision-making on those elements. From the policy and ordinance standpoint, there's a couple on your list. The clean heat standard ordinance, the short-term rental ordinance.
Eric, you're probably going to need to talk up.
Yeah, the short-term rental ordinance, the clean heat standard ordinance, any other policy ordinance development work, that could take a little bit of time with scheduling with other boards and commissions, so I want to make sure I got those.
I think, personally, I think they're very important, and I think, but I as Jean has noted for a few items, I think there's a lot of background kind of other, committees and things, work that needs to go into it. Like, we've expressed that, the short-term rental ordinance is a high priority, but it's really the planning commission, right, that would be developing that, so.
Yeah, probably working with the manager's office
yeah.
to move
Right.
it forward.
Yeah, so I see that as less of the select board specific work, like we've given the directive that we would prioritize it, but we need other folks to kind of take up that mantle a little bit.
Yes, and this sort of develop the density ordinances is clearly an ordinance-related one, too.
Yeah, because part of this can be, your direction to your advisory boards and commissions. So, it could be, I could relate to the planning commission, if that's a goal of the select board for it to focus some of its work in the coming year. Kind of helping saying, is this first half of the year, the select board wants to see this late winter, or, how does, is it a July item for the planning commission or a December item for the planning commission, things like that.
Well, Ellie knows how the planning commission works better, but I would be open to their, this is what we're thinking, what do you need from us, or how would you want to approach this? Because if they're 3/4 of the way through the short-term rental thing, we don't want to pull them from that to start over on something else, so.
Right.
I would be open to,
Yeah, I definitely, I agree. I think, get their perspective on that. I do see that as, I would hope is a priority for them, especially with so much development and housing like on the, horizon.
hey, they brought it to us.
Right, right. So I would hope that it would be, like that it is a priority for them because we, want to get that taken care of before,
Right, but I would hate to tell them, we want the clean heat standard first, if they're 3/4 of the way through the
Yeah,
other one. Yeah, that's the short-term rental, so.
yeah.
And that one's sitting with my office right now.
The clean heat?
The short-term
short-term
rental
rental,
ordinance. We've got to do some work with that with some other departments. So
Okay.
it'd probably be, that helps set, Aaron and I's priorities for our planning, and then we would need to circle back with the planning commission. And we have to work with some other town departments on some elements of that one too.
It's hard for me to sit here and know where the pinch points are. Where's the funnel that's keeping, we can't, push too much through. Is it the planning commission? Is it your office? Is it,
Right.
Our schedule? It's like,
Yep.
so we'll need help. I need help navigating
Oh,
that.
yeah.
It was really the
That's right.
one document that kind of had the items listed with the kind of, the top 20 action items, but listing the commission or the, town manager or
Yes.
select board. That was really helpful too, to see kind of,
Yep.
yeah.
So I think what I'm hearing, work to move the short-term rental ordinance forward. We can prioritize some work on that in the coming months to try to get that to the board. Maybe it's early fall, something like that. I'm just trying to think of. It's May right now. I think it's realistic to probably get something to the board in that fall block prior to budget development time. The other one with the clean heat standard ordinance, it's been a while since I've checked in to see where we left that one, because it was discussion, I think, with the Energy Committee and the Planning Commission on that. And there's a lot that's happened in the last couple of years too. But in general, it sounds like that's something the board wants to have back for discussion.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that goes back to, reconnecting with, the Energy Committee and our energy plan and really keeping a better handle on, that and where the progress that's being made and all of that too. And again, ties in with, if we're looking at all this housing and development, we want to get ahead of having these things in place as we are, increasing potential development.
Mm-hmm.
Also recognizing the planning commission meets twice a month or whatever. Like, that's their agenda full too, I'm sure.
And I know they're working on their work plan for the next year too.
Yeah.
I was talking to Matt today, so feedback from the board is timely as they're working on that as well. Let's see, I'm just looking back to the lists here. One that the Catamount community forest potential building space. We were mapping that out a little bit today, and there's probably update for the select board coming this fall on some elements there. There's kind of a lot of checking in with some grant holders or easement holders and other follow-up items the select board had asked for as part of that planning. So, do you remember, Gene? Did we say
August.
it was like it was kind of an August timeline update?
Look at that, we'll be all done by Christmas. We'll just put everything on the list, it's all done by Christmas.
We had talked about like getting, I mean, I know you're going through items, but like updates either quarterly or I hope that's still part of the plan. Because I think that will kind of keep us on track and keep us focused on some of these things and make sure we're actually making the progress that we are setting out today to be making.
Yeah, I was thinking, something maybe similar to this format, if this worked for the board, kind of maybe project status, what's happened the last quarter, what's planned for the next quarter with
For
that type
each,
of
like,
presentation
committee,
be helpful.
or,
For each item.
or each,
Yeah, would that be helpful, format-wise?
Yeah.
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'll start that then. Just did this now. I'll see if there's some updates. We're working on the quarter report right now, so it
Yeah.
might not be in this one because we've done this one for today.
Yes,
but
that's fair.
there might not be anything else to update. but- So I'll read back to what I have right now. I've got, working on the TIF, CHIP, and infrastructure in the growth center discussions, looking at capital budget planning and kind of full budget sustainability planning, including the housing ERF funding, what some models would be for that. Some town facility infrastructure master planning, thinking about parks, community center project, bike and pedestrian infrastructure. Short-term rental ordinance work, kind of target for fall, back to the select board. Planning commission looking at some additional zoning and residential neighborhoods discussions. Clean heat standard ordinance and just overall energy plan discussion with the energy committee. And then the Catamount project, continuing that discussion probably later this summer. Some things are kind of throughout the year. Not sure if we've really set anything more of like a well, I don't go post-town meeting day. I think of the board's kind of heavier period of time when there's work outside of budget. And it's from, after town meeting day, the board gets reorganized, April, May, June, July, August, there's one meeting. So kind of this block we're in right now in these next few months, and we've got some big things lined up, the TIF chip especially coming up, the parks master plan. Those are some big future planning projects that will take probably multiple discussions for the select board. And then we get into the fall, and there's some pre-budget work, so that's when it comes in some of this budget planning, budget analysis work, budget goals direction from the select board as we're forming that in really September. And then you have that kind of September, October, November block for some potential policy work as well. And then it's really budget in December, January. Then you're leading up to town meeting and in February, and kind of my approach is don't start anything big and new in February because you might have different members on the board in March, and you kind of keep that as time to maybe have some updates, round out some work for the year. So in my thinking, you get these blocks kind of post-town meeting day into budget season, then a little bit post-budget season to help structure that, if that's helpful at all. Trying to, meeting twice a month and a little more for budget once in August. Really, so much time you have for policy making work and how we want to set that up for the year. Kind of run out of facilitating. I can.
Yeah. We did need a facilitator, you did great.
I guess there's still some time if there's general discussion from the board, anything else missed. My kind of next step would be putting this in more of a calendar format. And thanks, Gene, to put something together, a template to be thinking about here. I can take that back to you, refine this document, kind of bring that schedule type document, building in the other things. There's some other stuff that's more of a one-type meeting discussion. We just have in the pipeline a little bit here. And so that can change throughout the year.
I'm just thinking of your
Other things
calendar.
always come up.
You talked about, we get a presentation on TIF and CHIP. I'm sure it's not a one and done. So, you can say it's going to happen in June, but I'm sure we'll have another need another follow-up with questions or concerns or updates, or it's a big project.
This is connected, but also aside. Obviously, the hard and fast deadline for restorative justice is June 30th.
Yep.
So, will we be expecting, like, in June or in early July, kind of an update on what that's going to be looking like, what that transition is, the new model or whatnot?
Yeah, so right now, lined up for the June 2nd meeting is, there's going to be an MOU document that each community needs to adopt with the city of Burlington. So that's being worked on. I've worked on it with my manager colleagues, and legal is working on that a little bit as well. So our goal is to get that to you on June 2nd. Rachel Jolly, who's the director of the Burlington CJC, will attend that meeting and update on the overall transition planning, kind of where we are, where we're going, answer any questions. We'll present that MOU document, and then the board has another meeting in June if there's some questions, discussion on the MOU, that then could consider adoption at your second June meeting. So that's all in place prior to July.
This June meeting's going to be 6 hours long.
And also, yeah, then, the other business item is the enterprise fund budgets, and I think we've got that lined up for that June 2nd meeting as well. So that's pretty much your meeting on June 2nd are those topics,
Yeah.
as I recall.
Okay.
And then you're doing some work on some things this evening, like the volunteer policy that's getting introduced. That's a big policy to be talking about. You'll have that, I assume, on your agenda again to work towards adoption of that after your initial feedback. So I can kind of plug in where things are, and then get this back to you, probably at your next meeting. I can turn this around for May 19th and take it from there.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you for all the work on that. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, this is great.
Paul was great to talk through this.
Yeah.
I enjoy this big thinking stuff. It's good to have somebody to talk.
Let's talk to, right? Can you take a 3-minute break before we start it?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's take a recess and we'll be back at 7 PM. So, okay.
Was this the one with Christina going for today too? That was going to be.
So our children, Christina's children, they both do, we have kids in middle school track and high school track. So we just start all the track meets.
Christina today was saying, it was like, that looks like rain. She's like,
Yeah.
as long as it doesn't rain between 5 and 6.
I know, yeah, so that one got canceled, the late night.
Oh.
And they wouldn't have canceled it for just rain, they ran it rain on Saturday.
Yeah.
At least it's warm rain. But tomorrow, middle schoolers and rain and the track meets are like decidedly a less great combination.
The track's supposed to be so different between the gravel and the rubberized track at different schools too.
Yeah, and tomorrow's I think interviews, so it is super out.
Oh, yeah.
I know Kate was on the day around there.
Yeah, definitely. Once a cougar, always a cougar. Once a cougar, always a cougar.
Yeah, it's in her heart.
So the rain would cancel it? Is that?
No, they won't cancel the rain, but she'll make the rain like
Okay,
heavy rain.
yeah.
No rain, heavy rain, like,
Lightning?
so that's what it does today,
Yeah.
Understand, thank goodness.
Yeah.
But as a spectator, like, I have less skin in the game, just sitting there in the rain watching. On Saturday, I went to the meet, it was over at South Burlington. My kid was just running his own events, and I was like, I timed it so well. And then I stood there in the rain for 20 minutes, or not, sorry, 2 hours before the ran, and 1 minute of running, or less than 1 minute, and it was done. And
Yep. Yeah.
What's the distance he's doing?
it was for 100, 200, 400. So less than 1 minute every single time.
Yeah.
I hope he's appreciative, or maybe if not now, in the future. You know?
He is. And you know what, the track meets are in some ways better than football games.
Yeah. Yeah. Same with basketball. Yep.
At least with track meets, there's enough of a demand locally. State limits.
Oh, I thought they were all like.
There's nothing on. There's nothing, I just think it. I have an ice cream that's something we're for.
Okay. Okay, well. We did.
Thank you. I mean, I did watch, part of it. I would like to say I missed reading
Yeah.
Stepping into your shoes and reading a big long,
I didn't see that, but thank you. You can have it. You can have,
Can I?
you did a pretty good job.
All right.
Do it. Go for it. Please
Love
take
it.
on that job.
But just the long executive session.
Take on anything long out loud. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So the way the sound keeps going up and down. Christmas Eve. No vestments. He's gonna die. We're gonna begin, and this is the time where we get into a reverential silence. No. Yeah. Jesus is going, you go. Thanks. You're. That's.
I didn't shush anybody.
So we. I'm not ready. Okay. Y'all ready?
Yep.
Okay. We set? Okay, so we're going to reconvene the meeting and go on to the next. The meeting did begin at 6 with a select board retreat to talk about what we were going to be doing for the year. But next on the agenda is the minutes from April 21, 2026. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve, subject to modification.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Going through page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Hearing no requests for modification, all those in favor of approving the minutes say aye.
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 I'm
There are no-
abstain.
Oh, and one abstention. The minutes are approved. Next is public comment. This would be a time for anybody in the audience or participating online to make a comment about anything. It does not have to be on the agenda, but it can be. So we're going to ask, we generally would supposed to keep it to 3 minutes, so I'm going to ask, McHugh has volunteered to be our timer. He's very affable, and he'll be very gentle, but firm. Anyway, I do want to say before, I know there's an agenda item that is on for 7:22 about the community message. This would be the time to make a comment. I will also say that there have been some informal, in no way was there a quorum involved, but some informal conversations, and I understand that there's a significant chance that the statement is going to be withdrawn in favor of another approach of having community conversations and getting more input from people. So with that as a fair warning, I guess, does anybody wish to make a statement about?
So what I'll do is just hold up a piece of paper up to 3 minutes. So
I'm sorry?
It's just after 3 minutes, I'll just hold up a piece of paper for you, just so.
Okay, great, thank you. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Sherry Wormser, and thank you all for being here again. And I just want to talk about the letter that hopefully will not go through today. And I encourage you to listen. I encourage you to listen to community members who have been fighting this fight for many years, who have been here taking on the risk to help save humanity and to help save our souls, to help save our neighbors and our friends. Because if you are actually willing to listen, we have proof. We have proof of police collaboration with ICE and violating FIP. We have proof that they have been brushing it under the rug. We have proof that they were aggressive and used things like illegal chokeholds. And if you are actually willing to listen, we can do wonderful things in this community. Things here start in our communities. They start when people look the other way. They start when our communities say we are too busy. They start when police do things like they did on Friday. And I want to tell you a little bit about what the Williston Police did on Friday at May Day. We had it set up so that if people were coming out of Hannaford, they would be approached by a big crowd, and that could be overwhelming for people. So we had people who were customer liaisons. And if somebody was coming out of Hannaford, we would say, "Hi, friend, this is scary. Would you like us to walk you to your car? Let me tell you why we are here. We are not here against you. We are here to support fair working conditions." However, the police in Williston, without speaking to anyone, they told everyone inside Hannaford that we were basically kidnapping them and holding them hostage because they refused to let people go out the front doors without even asking what we had planned, how we were going to allow people out of the building. They didn't even ask if we were going to allow in emergency vehicles. Of course we were going to. So they dropped them off in the back of Hannaford and said, "Here you go, bye." Let them walk to the front of Hannaford by themselves, facing a crowd that they did not know what was there. They did not even ask if they had mobility issues or anxiety or anything like that. What you say and what you do matters, and how you react in public matters. So without saying anything, every single one of those police members told the people in Hannaford that we were essentially kidnapping or hijacking them. That is unacceptable. If you really want to work with the community to do really good with what's happening, then I encourage you to listen how the police is brushing this under the rug. I encourage you to talk with members in the Richmond Select Board and Police Force who had a meeting last night, and they were listening. I encourage you to meet with people like Migrant Justice to look at what we can do to keep our neighbors safe. These are Anne Frank times. The only difference is Anne Frank was a middle-class white family. The people who are being taken today are brown skinned and mostly poor. And that is still not acceptable. What is happening is not acceptable. And as a select board, you have the opportunity to really listen and make change. This starts with us. This starts in our communities, where we actually make change and we put in policies in place so that there are no copycat rapes where people are wearing masks, so that there are judicial warrants that are actually validated, because we have proof that the police and ICE both knew early in the morning that the person that they were looking for and that they eventually got a judicial warrant were not in the house. Let me repeat that. They knew around 9 or 10 in the morning, and yet the police collaborated with them to kidnap 3 people. If you are willing to listen, we are here to help, and we can actually make a difference. It starts here in our communities. If you want to avoid and be comfortable, that will start here in our communities also. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to make a comment? Okay, go ahead.
Hi, folks. I'm Lisa Mueller-Rao, resident of Williston, and in regards to migrant justice, everybody's challenged by the wild overreach of our federal government. They're assuming way too much power, and they're taking away all of our constitutional rights. They're murdering people, torturing people, violating our neighbors' due process rights with impunity. The only way to stop this tyranny is for us not to comply, for us not to obey in advance, and always to oppose these kinds of actions that harm us and our communities. We have to stand together with our local police and troopers, these men, women, and service animals we pay for. They're a huge part of our neighborhood. We depend on them to protect us from ICE and CBP, who've proven that they will ignore and violate our rights. We have to stop the further expansion of ICE in Williston. They're capitalizing on the resources and infrastructure that are in place that our tax dollars paid for. The lawlessness of the federal agencies involved has been seen in their violent actions that are against our communities all over Vermont and elsewhere. There's no place for that in our town. I'm really proud of our town because they're bracing for this federal onslaught and really trying to plan for the greater good of the most people. And the fact that we're having these discussions is indicative of that. And I hope we can continue them. And it's easy to get our feelings in an uproar for the way that we feel slighted or an injustice has happened to us or people that we care about. And if we talk about it and work out what we can do to prevent the injustice, it'll go towards healing, because it's going to be tough. It's not over. It's not going to be over. But thank you for letting me say something, and thank you all for being here, because it really means that y'all care, and I'm grateful to y'all.
Thank you.
That's all.
Thank you very much. I saw other hands. Sure.
Hi. My name is Rachel Wiley. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you for letting me speak tonight. I am an occupational therapist by background. My niche is in dementia care. So what I typically work with families on is dementia-related behavior. So often things like wandering from the home, repeating, and very commonly aggression. So I help families handle non-pharmacologically physical aggression and verbal aggression. I've been bit, punched, hit, kicked, thrown, people have thrown furniture at me. All of these things have been done in strangers' homes. I go into people's homes who I don't know. And not once have I ever responded to any of that aggression with aggression. I've always been able to de-escalate the situation. I know what de-escalation looks like. And I was present at Dorset Street on March 11th, and I can tell you with certainty that local police and state police did not de-escalate the situation. At one point, I found myself in front of an ICE vehicle, peacefully protesting, trying to prevent my neighbors from being kidnapped. And I was physically assaulted by a local police officer and an ICE agent who grabbed me and threw me out of the way. That's not peaceful, that's not de-escalating a situation. So I would encourage you, when you're considering the police narrative that has come out of that event, that you please consider that their perspective of what de-escalation is not what true de-escalation looks like from those of us who live it in our everyday lives with people who are potentially actually violent. And I also think it's really important to consider that the community at large is not trained, right? Like, I know that I have background and professional skills in de-escalation, but that's not the norm for the majority of our neighbors. And yet, somehow we expect our neighbors in these events where emotions are really heightened, where their neighbors are potentially being kidnapped, we're expecting them to remain calm and composed when we have police with firearms protecting the people who are doing the kidnapping. That's a really difficult power dynamic and unrealistic expectation. The thing that has been most difficult for me after the March 11th event has been the gaslighting that has come out of that. I saw firsthand how beautiful our community was, how supportive. I've met some incredible humans because of that event, and yet I feel like we've been villainized by the media and by politicians, and especially by local police, and that just wasn't my experience. So please consider the experience of those of us who were there when you are thinking about your next actions. Thank you.
Other, come on.
Hi guys, my name is Jackie Raya. I live down the street. Very happy to be a Williston resident. I prepared a statement, so sorry if I am looking at my phone and not looking at you guys in the eyes. So last Friday I had the privilege of participating in the May Day protest and march. One speaker in particular really struck me. I sadly can't recall their name or who they were affiliated with, but their closing line has been rattling around in my brain ever since. They asked, "What kind of an apocalypse do you want to have?" It's a startling question, and one I've been trying to answer for myself since. The one thing I've landed on so far is to make sure our communities and our neighbors are protected and safe. There is so much that feels like it's out of our hands. That's why it's important to make sure we're shining a spotlight on what we can do, things we have control over. We can control how prepared we are, we can control how clearly we communicate our values, and we can control what protections we put in place for our neighbors. Other communities around the country have already begun implementing practical local responses. Today, I urge y'all, the Select Board, to consider similar action here in Williston. I have 3 things. Number 1, create clear signage for private property owners. Cities like Chicago and Minneapolis have made free signage available for property owners to clearly designate private and non-public areas. Williston should create or distribute similar signs to help residents and businesses limit ICE access on private property. Number 2, prohibit the use of town property as ice staging grounds. Some cities have taken action to prevent ICE from using municipal parking lots, garages, vacant lots, and other public property as staging areas. Williston should pass an ordinance or a policy that makes it clear that town-owned property cannot be used to support ICE activity. And last, support a rapid response reporting system. Communities like Portland, Oregon have developed volunteer-based hotlines that also have text capability for reporting ICE sightings and mobilizing support. Williston should support or partner with a local or regional rapid response network so residents know where to turn if A, ICE is seen in the area, or B, if a loved one goes missing. While none of these alone are a silver bullet, small sustained acts have made a noticeable impact around the country and together create a strong foundation for us in order to fight back. I now urge you as our elected officials to represent not only those who have spoken up, but those who cannot speak for fear of retaliation. In closing, I echo the statement from last week again. What kind of apocalypse do we want to have?
Thank you. Other folks? Anybody else?
My name is Brant Dinkin, and I'm a resident of Williston. And it's a privilege to be here and be part of this conversation. Okay. I commend everyone who's putting energy into this. We all have a lot of balls to juggle, and but I appreciate the understanding of the importance of this. And we can't, end this by just throwing our hands up and saying there's nothing that can be done, And, as Jackie just mentioned, preparation, we have the advantage of preparation now, because unfortunately we have the experience of March 11th. And so we need to act on that. There's two documents that I just, received shortly before this meeting. And maybe the select board has them also, but I certainly want to make sure that you all do. Okay, and one of them was created by the Racial Equity Partnership. And it's a letter to the Richmond Selectboard, the Richmond Racial Equity Partnership. And it was developed by also the interim Chief of Police, Matt Cohen. And it's a guideline for preparation for anyone, protesters and police. And, the select boards have the authority to create these guidelines for the police. And, I urge the Williston Select Board to do the same thing, sit down and work with the Chief of Police and, work with other representatives. And the other document that, I just received was from Migrant Justice. And they're very interested in the outcome of this meeting, okay? And they have, and I don't know whether you all select board members received this, but I'm going to forward that to you also. And it's preparation guidelines for anyone that's going to be at the scene of an ICE raid. And they're all like excellent documents. And it really gives the select board great models, so we don't have to, pull anything out of the air. Just give me a minute. One of the things that I think is really important is that, it's great that we're all here, but this kind of a format, because of the restriction, because the public is limited, we cannot have a dialogue, okay? And for effective input, it's critical to have a dialogue. So I strongly recommend that the select board, form a committee. And I know you've had members on it already, like select board and the chief of police and the town manager. But you also include stakeholders like migrant justice and community members who have been involved, on the scene of ice raids. And, let's really get really good input along with these two documents and the collective wisdom of the community. Maybe, some demonstrators also. So that's like the main thing I wanted to say, and I hope that we can't talk about it here, but I hope you'll consider it, okay? And let's see if I forgot anything. My time is almost up. If a protester chooses to act on behalf of protecting a migrant person's rights, it should be made clear that this situation is unprecedented. Migrant people's First and Fourth Amendments are not available, which leaves a dangerous vacuum for their safety. But if a protester steps into this vacuum, they risk serious injury or even death. So either choice is really bad, and ICE has created this situation. So I think that's what we have to wrestle with. ICE does not follow the law, which is why our job of guidance of what to do is, like I said, so difficult. Some ICE may very well be proud boys with lethal weapons and are well protected and have a license to kill. And we should really drive those points home to protesters. And it should include safety tips, like Officer Matt Cohen mentioned at one of our meetings. First, never dig into your pocket to get your phone. You can get shot for that, the last thing I want to say is that local police will not interfere with ICE's job, okay? They can't by law. Aside it from being illegal, wouldn't that be tantamount to civil war? Another really good reason, okay? So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Other folks? Anybody? In the back?
I also have a statement on my phone. Oops. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us. My name is Tess Mulder-Seal. I'm a social worker and a resident of Williston. I was also there for the events of March 11th in South Burlington. There are so many areas to cover that, I think a lot of my fellow speakers have great ideas for how to address, some for supporting our community and feeling safer prior to an ICE enforcement action, some for how to respond during, and so I will narrow my focus for afterwards, since that's been a frequent topic of conversation over the last few weeks. As I'm sure many people know, last month, the state's attorney, Sarah George, declined to charge 3 protesters that had been arrested on March 11th and had referred 3 others to Burlington Community Justice Center. Given that conversations around this topic often include some reminder that protesters can, and maybe even likely will, be arrested in the event of a similar incident in Williston in the future, I would ask that town leadership advocate for referral to our own Community Justice Center in whatever capacity they can. Contrary to criticisms of this decision, referring these cases to a restorative justice process doesn't encourage lawbreaking or violence. Instead, it prevents the legal system from being used to further normalize abuses of power by the federal government. In our current system, criminal charges often serve to push people towards the outskirts of a community. They can close doors to job opportunities, housing, and disrupt family stability. Restorative justice offers accountability without adding more harm than what may have already taken place. Multiple levels of cooperation are needed to either uphold or interrupt oppressive systems. Community members in South Burlington refused to cooperate with the kidnapping of our neighbors. In declining to punish the protesters in the way that the system would have otherwise demanded, Sarah George refused to collude with ICE's injustice on Vermont's behalf. I would ask that, given the opportunity, Williston do the same. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other folks, anybody else? Sure.
Hello, my name's Nick Driscoll. I'm not a resident of Williston. I'm a resident of Winooski, but I was there on the events of March 11th, and I'm a community organizer. And I just wanted to pull on a couple of threads that haven't been touched on. At the end, I would like to reiterate the actionable steps that some of the people that have already spoken have mentioned, because I think that's what's really important for this body as the voice of the community, to be able to take actionable steps on this. But just to be a little bit inflammatory, the history of these types of things is not fully unprecedented in this country. Chattel slavery existed in a legal framework here. The Fugitive Slave Act was passed in 1850 that required escaped slaves to be returned to their slave owners. And my question, here to a town select board is, what's the role of a town select board in engaging with those types of issues? When the federal government passes a law that is acting in ways that are so abhorrent and so unethical that we all are universally condemning. I mean, you guys passed a resolution that was wonderful, blanket condemns what ICE is doing. We all know it. The community feels that way. We've all expressed it. The question becomes, what do we do about it? What's actionable? How much power do we have? And where do we put those energies? So a lot of conversation has happened around police force response to this. And I think Brand mentioned quite well why police force aren't intervening to stop ICE. It's structural. If they pulled a gun and said, ICE, stop assaulting those protesters, it's going to escalate the situation, be very dangerous. It's the reason protesters aren't showing up armed to these things, despite the fact that it's our constitutional and state right to. We understand that that's going to create a more dangerous situation for our neighbors who are already being victimized and having violence done onto them. So given that, when police respond to these situations, their only options then are to either passively spectate or to intervene and cooperate with ICE, which is what we saw on March 11th. Ultimately, they kind of fell in line and cooperated and helped ICE steal our neighbors. So as an actionable step out of that, I would say that something this board should consider is, can we mobilize EMS and fire in response to these types of actions rather than police? Somebody who can provide meaningful aid to people who have been harmed, people who have, been injured, somebody who's going to step in and actually do something positive in the situation rather than what we saw from our police. It's okay. Already been mentioned, but reaching out to migrant justice, really, I would say take whatever recommendations they give you. They've been fighting this fight for a long time, and we'll be able to point in their direction, but that very well could be connecting to their rapid response network and trying to get people in the town of Williston connected to their rapid response network. But yeah, I would just consider us all take whatever actionable steps we can to do this. I'm glad to see that the statement was retracted. It seemed like it really only served to condemn protesters for showing up and question the legality of the actions that they were taking, rather than offer, support against something that we all know is dangerous and wrong that's being done unto us. And I would ask, the community to show up in the myriad of ways that you already have been and that you can. Get organized, talk to migrant justice, talk to any of the various community organizations that we have. Williston Equity and Democracy is here. They've been doing a lot of good work. I'm co-leading a No Way Surveillance Center in Vermont campaign. Come talk to me and get plugged into that. There's a variety of avenues for folks to get connected and fight this fight. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else?
Good evening. My name's Smokey Fox. I'm a resident of Williston. And, you turned off the mic. Excuse me? You turned off the mic. Oh, sorry about that. I don't have a whole lot to add to what already has been said here, but I do want to thank you all for engaging in this conversation, bringing up the matter, and being willing to listen. I really appreciated the fact that we were the first town, I believe, to pass the resolution against ICE. I think that showed a lot of courage, and I think we all have the courage to do more. I very much agree that police tend to escalate situations. I think it's an excellent idea, what Nick just mentioned about bringing in fire or rescue in a situation like happened in South Burlington. And I think the Richmond proposal that, I don't know if you all received a copy of it, you did? Okay. I think that's an excellent framework to work off from for our own resolution in this town for how police should respond. Personally, I think if police were to respond to an action like what happened on March 11th, it should be to intercede to protect people from being unlawfully taken like they were. I know that's not going to happen, but personally I feel like that was their responsibility, and I know they're not going to do it, so they might as well just stay home. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody, any other comment?
Hey there. So I'm here to talk about a lighter yet maybe somewhat more divisive topic in Williston. So I'm here to talk about the library expansion vote. We all know that it's coming up on the 19th of the month. We're finally in the month, so yay, it's not so distant. So one thing I wanted to bring up, this is, one of the points that I think gets lost in this is the town council did a great job using federal funds for the planning of the expansion project. A lot of the work that came with the architect and all the money that it took to develop the plan as it currently stands came out of federal grant money. We didn't have to pay out of city pocket to get this done. But if we go through this reconsideration process, that doesn't get to happen a second time around. The money to do the reconsideration, to put a new plan together, to do another vote on this, it's all going to come out of city pocket. So just want to, say that this isn't something we get to do for free. If you want to go down the reconsideration, that could completely be your opinion, but just know that it's not something that's going to happen without a cost to the community, to our budget. Now, given our town is very well situated, I'm sure we can afford it. But that's money that could be going elsewhere for something that we all already voted for and approved. So I'm voting no when it comes to the 19th. I hope other people do too. But more importantly, I hope everyone just comes out to vote. Because once again, this is a civic duty. If we all come together and we obviously come and voted a second time around, let's just let the results stand this time around. All right, thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, all right, let's go down the line.
I'm also a vote for no, but also another place that is safe to allow any humans to enjoy a space in a safe way is the library. And a place where I also learned about the migrant justice community. There was a little flyer there a couple months ago. So I think there's a common thread here. Thank you.
Thank you. Other people? I saw other hand. Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to go down the line, but I pointed at her first. So, okay. Yeah.
I brought a few photos that I took on March 11th. I can hold them up, or I did print out copies that you could look at if you're interested.
Whatever you want.
Just the first one isn't mine. It's the person who inspired me to start citizen journalism.
You just say your name too?
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
I'm Nathaniel Madison. I'm an Apple featured photographer. Since the end of 2024, I've made an effort to try to document every protest I can in the general area, which was why I was present on March 11th. So the reason why I'm holding this picture is because this is one of the people that inspired me to try my hand at citizen journalism. This is a Russian photographer, Dmitry Markov. This is his most popular image. It went completely viral. This is after Markov's arrest during the Navalny-led protests. This is one of Putin's masked secret police members. And unfortunately, this is starting to look quite similar, isn't it? In some ways, considering ICE has now a larger budget than many countries' entire military budget, and Trump recently announcing that he'll be president for another 8 to 9 years, it's starting to look like we are in quite a similar circumstance. And yeah. So I think most of us agree at this point that ICE is an unaccountable federal agency. I was still struck by some of the wording in the draft that I had read about the proposed statement that seemed to discuss this agency as doing federal work as if it's engaged in legitimate federal conduct, where I witnessed up close and personal on March 11th, sadistic ICE agents from New Hampshire taking pleasure in the distress they were inflicting on Vermonters. That is not a friendly smile. That guy thought it was absolutely hilarious, that it was like, this guy's best day of the year, tormenting Vermonters. So again, this is not a legitimate federal agency. This is President Trump's secret police force, and clearly one of the goals of this organization is retribution against blue states that didn't vote for him. So I'm just a photographer. I'm not an organizer or political activist, so I'm personally not sure of what the town of Williston can do. But I just want to reiterate what other Vermonters have suggested as starting points. And one of the ideas that resonated with me the most would be to simply not send local police to ICE raids in the first place, and instead send EMS and fire department services to aid any community defenders that were injured or harassed by ICE members. So the state's police forces have defended their actions on the 11th as being undertaken in order to protect Vermonters. That is patently false. Okay? In fact, when ICE attempted to kidnap people a few days before the March 11th clash, state and local PD didn't show up to that event, and the community defenders mobilized by Migrant Justice's rapid response were able to repel ICE without any incidents. So there is a clear case that we can go on in the future. And another idea that I've seen others suggest is if the town of Williston can collaborate with Migrant Justice. So somebody already said that, so that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So another, your photos.
Hi, I'm Molly Parent. I'm a resident of Williston. I'll keep it very brief because a lot of these topics have been covered pretty thoroughly, I feel like, but I felt like I wanted to lend my perspective as someone who was there on the 11th as well. I came to document as much as I can and to get as much of an outside perspective as I could. And based on what my observations were, there was very little consideration for community safety, for community public well-being from when I was in attendance. While I know the police there were in a horrible situation, everyone there was in a horrible situation except for, I think, ICE, who was enjoying themselves. But I don't think that doing things the way that they have been done is a good reason to do them. I think that we are in a time when we need to do things differently, as many people have been suggesting, because the way that things are being done are not protecting our community members. They're not protecting vulnerable people here that we are trying to protect. An example of where it would have been nice to have EMS or fire department there was after ICE and the local police left on the 11th. Protesters were injured laying in the street, and the roads were reopened entirely. And I turned around, and there were now cars trying to come down through the space where people were injured on the road. Therefore, I took out a reflective vest and put that on and started directing traffic. But that's not what I should be doing. That I have no qualifications in that stance, and there are people who are supposed to be protecting us in those spaces. And I think it's important to note that even though everything was supposedly legal that we did on Vermonters' side for as far as the Vermont State Police did, and that doesn't mean it's okay. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do it differently in the future. And I would urge you, and I know you guys have taken a really strong stance so far and voiced dissent against ICE, and I would urge you to continue doing so and continue supporting your community like you have been. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to add that the police refused to call EMS at Dorset Street. And I'd also like to add that Burlington admitted that they did not even use their medical kits.
Okay.
So I just want to add that from what people were saying.
All right, thank you. Any other public comment?
I have one on Zoom.
Okay.
Peter, I'm going to connect you. Can you hear us, Peter?
Yes, can you folks hear me okay?
Yep, go ahead, Peter.
Great. Yeah, I'll keep it short, and I just want to echo a couple ideas that I heard that were new. I really like the idea of EMS and maybe fire being there to help with people who get injured. I want to first of all especially thank Gene Jensen, who I wasn't at the last meeting, but I watched that meeting after the fact, and I really appreciate Gene pushing back on what felt like the board was moving towards passing that resolution, and Gene really sort of stood up and said, I don't feel okay about this. So I appreciate Gene allowing this to get pushed forward for another 2 weeks to have this conversation and for the board to ultimately not retract, but sort of make a different decision than what was in that, than the language in that previous statement. Police are in an absolutely horrible position right here, and that they're not going to be asked to, they can't be asked to fight against federal agents. But I do think that as you're moving forward as a board and thinking about what statement you want to make, I really want to suggest that you think about what you are going to ask your police to do. And in the previous statement, there was a lot of language saying, if protesters do this, then police will do that. If protesters do this, then police will do that. And it was very much framed around protesters being the problem and police sort of being stuck with all they can do is do their job. If it's going to take that sort of a perspective again around, if this happens, then this will happen, then I would encourage you to think about putting in there explicit language about what will happen if police are found to have been taunting protesters or being inappropriate in their response and their professionalism with protesters. Of course, that's already all established I'm sure that's all in the contract that the town has with the police department. I'm sure there's a system in place for that, but there's also a system in place for what happens to protesters. But the board felt it was important to tell protesters, if you break the law, you might be arrested. Similarly, I think it's equally important to tell the police, if you are found to have been taunting or inappropriate professionally, there will be these consequences for you as well. And I would again echo what folks have been saying about the Richmond language. This is an extremely difficult situation where police can't legally do anything. But I felt that Richmond really did a good job of navigating that with some of the statements they made about what police will and will not do. And lastly, I feel that I wanted to address a couple of things that Ted Kenny said at the last meeting, which I felt were really flippant and inappropriate. At one point, I'm not sure this is a direct quote, but Ted said something to the effect of, protesters will never win against federal agents. They're not going to just say, quote, okay, then I guess we'll go back to Washington. In fact, as the previous speaker said, that has happened and protectors have showed up and ICE has backed off. Maybe they didn't go back to Washington. Maybe they came back later and got people. But the bottom line is that protesters do work. Protesters are effective in protecting their community in a way that the police simply cannot do. And the police, I think, are feeling, what can we do? We've got to do something. And all they can do is, if they can't push back against ICE, is push back against citizens. And I feel that the select board really needs to take leadership and ownership of the actions of the police and be as explicit as possible into what they do and do not want police to do. And the last thing I'll say is that I called VLCT, the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, this morning, and got a call back from Ted, I think his name is Ted Brady, and I talked to him a bit about asking him to support select boards, and I won't get into the back and forth we had, but what he said was that they've reached out to police departments about sort of what they should be thinking about in terms of responding to ICE. And I encouraged him to reach out to select boards explicitly and referenced you folks and Richmond as people who were currently wrestling with this. Maybe you've already spoken with VLCT, which would be great, but if you haven't, I would encourage you to speak with them for their guidance around how this relates to town liability and your passive insurance, and sort of what is so if police show up to a scene where ICE is involved and police don't get involved and don't move protesters, and a protester does get run over and killed by a federal agent, right? Because that's what protesters are saying, which is that we don't want the police to get involved. And if we're participating in civil disobedience and putting our lives on the line, let us do that. If that goes down, I would think that Williston might want to talk to Passive and your insurance folks about what is the town's liability. And if that's a liability that the town is willing to absorb, and we're willing to tell our police, do not move protesters when they're conducting civil disobedience, and we understand what the consequences of that could be, but that this feels important to us. So sort of trying to move beyond the question of what can the police do and not do, but get it down to where the town matters, which is the town's insurance policy and what the town's liability as an organization is. I hope I haven't gone over 3 minutes. Thank you very much for your time, and good luck getting this sorted. It's a challenging situation.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? Any other public comment? Hearing none? Okay. So, next on the agenda would be a public hearing for attachment A of sewer allocation ordinance. I see Matt coming down the
Matt
pike.
was here. Oh.
He's here. So let me, pursuant to the statute, let me convene the public hearing. Pursuant to 24 VSA Chapter 59 and Section 4 of the Town of Williston Sewer Allocation Ordinance, the Williston Selectboard is considering the adoption of amendments to the sewer allocation ordinance referred to as Attachment A, an existing ordinance pertaining to the allocation of public sewage. Upon adoption, this attachment will designate the portion of the uncommitted reserve capacity that will be available for use during the next fiscal year, which starts July 1, 2026. A public hearing on this matter is scheduled for Tuesday, May 5, 2026 at 7:05. We're a little behind on that. In the Beckett McGuire Meeting Room in the Williston Town Hall, located at 7900 Williston Road, or remotely. So with that, the public hearing is open. Matt, did you have a couple of explanatory comments that you could make, and then we'll see if...
Sure, I'll be as brief as I can. And Eric, if you have just the chart of recommended allocation by category from the final page and can show it, I'll cease trying to join the Zoom meeting and just get on
I'll find it.
with talking through sewer allocation.
This is the biggest turnout you've ever had.
A lot of people interested in our sewer system.
I mean, I could talk about wastewater for a long time if you want. So the reason for holding a public hearing is because that is what the Town of Williston Sewer Allocation Ordinance says that the Select Board will do once a year, that the Select Board will look at current flows running through the system, the amount of wastewater that Williston conveys over to the plant at Essex Junction, which it shares with the City of Essex Junction and the Town of Essex, compare that flow to the amount of capacity that Williston owns at the plant, as well as any capacity that's been committed to permitted development but has not yet come online, along with a 7% reserve, which is recommended by our engineer. When you take those numbers out of what the town owns at the plant, you can arrive at an understanding of how much remaining capacity can be allocated to new users in the system. And then from that larger number, and in understanding, the history of usage we've had, which is affected by a number of factors, including the economy, the weather, demographics, et cetera, make a decision about how much capacity to make available in the coming fiscal year, which is what the hearing sets. That's called Attachment A to the Sewer Allocation Ordinance. Once those numbers have been adopted and the fiscal year turns, the town manager is able, with the advice of Planning and the Public Works Department, to enter into agreements to sell that capacity, reserve it for new developments that are coming through our permit pipeline as the categories break out. So what is up on the screen right now in the green column on the far right are the recommended amounts of capacity that we would make available under this motion for FY27, and long story short, they are the same amounts of capacity that were adopted last year for FY26. There's about, 7 years worth of history there in Table 6. Generally, the amount made available has gone up over the years. The amount that's actually sold has fluctuated quite a bit more dramatically than that. We have big years and small years, just depending on the scale of development and how many phases somebody's purchasing capacity for as it comes through. But the division of capacity here, as shown in the green column, is by land use. And generally, this provides headroom in each of these categories. In other words, we would be seeing an unprecedentedly large request in this coming year to exceed these numbers. If somebody did have a large request, somebody came to us with a development we had not anticipated, there are two pathways that they could still move forward. One would be to come to the select board on an up-down vote and ask to purchase from the encouraging specific development category, which would be adopted under this motion, have 10,000 gallons in it. That's for development that furthers a goal of the town plan. So when that happens, planning and zoning prepares a memo about the request, looking at the land use the person is proposing and seeing whether it helps the town further a town plan goal. The other way somebody could move forward, even if these categories did not support what they wanted to do, is they could come and ask the select board to hold another hearing and re-amend Attachment A. We do it once a year because the ordinance says we should and need to, but it can be amended by the board at any time. So this sets the pattern. All of our sort of day-to-day sale of capacity that goes on with our development permitting happens under Attachment A. But if something very large or special were to come forward, they would come back to you and talk to you about that. So, any questions?
These are the same numbers that we reviewed in depth with you a month ago or so.
The very same.
As they should be.
It wouldn't be as exciting if we went over them again.
I know.
But it is so any questions from the board? No? Okay. Public comment on Schedule A? Anybody wish to make a statement?
Question, but I can
Sure.
read that. The encouraging allotment, can that be used with CHIP projects? So in a way to reduce the overhead of the town infrastructure?
Sure. So CHIP is the Community Housing and Infrastructure Program. It's a project-based tax increment finance program that projects that would move forward under CHIP must have a minimum 60% of their construction must be about creating housing. Housing is a very large goal in the town plan, stated in a number of ways. Would generally recommend that a project seeking encouraging specific development allocation that was bringing housing to the town be approved to access that. However, I will note we have both a new residential category with 30,000 gallons per day in it, which will support a couple hundred dwelling units of various sizes, as well as an affordable housing category in Attachment A that supports about another 100 units. So if we ran through that supply for some reason and somebody had another project, whether they were pursuing CHIP or not, producing housing would be seen as a town plan goal, particularly housing that came in at some kind of perpetually affordable level and arrangement.
Other questions from the public? It is a public hearing on Schedule A. Hearing none? Okay, anybody online? No? Okay. All right. So if there is no further input, a motion to close the public hearing would be in order.
I'll move to close the public hearing on amendments to the wastewater allocation ordinance.
Is there a second?
A second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
There are no nays. The motion carries. The public hearing is closed. That would bring us to the next item, the amendment of Attachment A for sewer allocation ordinance. And there is a proposed motion, and if the board wishes to engage in discussion.
Move to adopt amendments to the wastewater allocation ordinance attachment A as proposed.
Is there a second?
Second?
Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. There are no nays. Sewer attachment A is adopted.
Democracy in action.
Thank you. I'm available Monday to Friday in my office to just further discuss Attachment A if anybody wants to make an appointment.
Thank you, Matt.
Have a good night.
Thank you, Matt.
So that would bring us to fiscal year 2027 roadway paving funding. Eric?
Yeah, my request would be to table this for a couple weeks. We just have some final numbers to look at with
Okay.
the stormwater fund there as well. So it would be fine. It won't affect any future paving planning, so.
Summer paving will still happen
It will still
on schedule. Rest assured, you'll live Williston.
Yep. So is that,
We should be able to take this up on the 19th, a little more.
Do you need to move to a table?
we haven't made a motion, so we can just.
So just table.
we can just-
Table.
yeah, we just-
Okay.
yeah. All right. Well, that was okay. So that would bring us up to community message, immigration and customs enforcement.
So it's my proposition that we do not move forward with this proposed public statement or a statement of this nature at this time, but rather I am proposing that we proceed with conversations with community organizations and advocates in order to learn from not only March 11th, but other instances around the country of what has been done. Obviously, anytime there's an ICE raid, it's a fluid situation, and so there's no way to prepare, but to understand what happened, what went wrong, what can be done to keep all of our community members safe and their rights protected. So I'm proposing that we go that avenue instead, reach out to, as many have suggested, Migrant Justice, Williston for Equity and Democracy, Indivisible, Sarah George, and other organizations to engage in dialogue and to plan as best we are able to, and then in the future to potentially hold some facilitated community conversations regarding concerns and potential actions that the town can take.
Comments?
I like the approach.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, I agree. I think that's a great idea. Okay, so with that, again, there's no proposed motion and no motion has been made, so we will table that and begin the process of community interaction. So, thank you. That would bring us to the next item, which is the amendment to the town volunteer policy, which is incredibly exciting. It's municipal governance is just
Parks and Rec,
lightning.
this is real.
So, yeah. So, but anyway, feel free to stay. Feel free to leave. It's not a class. Your teacher's not going to care. So, but whatever.
Thank you for your time, though. for
Yeah.
everything.
Thank you all for
and
showing
thank you
up
for your
and
input.
speaking out.
Thank you very much for your input, all of you. So, but that does bring us to Aaron.
I'm gonna wait for the slides to boot up.
Yep.
It's okay. Folks a minute to clear out anyway, so.
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Yeah.
You'll never hear the end of it from Matt, because they stayed for the sewer ordinance, and they left for you.
I feel honored. All right. So, Erin Dickinson, Assistant Town Manager, for those who have not met me yet.
And I want to extend my thanks to you all for reviewing the draft policy in advance. I know you read it front to back and memorized every word of it. But before I dive into this presentation, I want to first acknowledge that Williston's volunteers are truly remarkable. And the people who serve on governing bodies, coach youth sports, steward town land, and give their time in countless other ways are one of the town's greatest assets. Everything we're presenting tonight and that's in this policy is in service of supporting that contribution more effectively. And tonight I want to orient you to what this policy is, why it's needed, and how it was developed. And then, of course, answer any questions that you have, hear your initial reactions, and receive any direction that you may provide. So, next slide, Eric. Why this policy? Why now? As volunteer activity has grown and diversified, so has the complexity of managing it responsibly. Our existing volunteer policy focuses on governance volunteers and has served the town well for a long time. However, it no longer reflects the full complexity of what governance volunteer management requires today, and it leaves operational volunteerism without a framework. On the governance side, this policy significantly strengthens what exists, moving from general expectations to clearly defined conduct standards, attendance requirements, and documented criteria. This clarity benefits volunteers by setting transparent expectations, supporting consistent decision-making, and reducing uncertainty about volunteer roles. On the operational side, volunteers are involved across departments and programs, events, land stewardship, organized group efforts, and much more, each carrying different legal, safety, and operational considerations. Some departments, like Recreation and the library, have developed sophisticated volunteer programs that work well and are further supported by this policy. Many of the challenges that we've experienced in recent years have been primarily elsewhere, where departments have been navigating questions about safety, liability, waivers, supervision, youth participation, approval processes, and much more, very inconsistently. This draft policy intends to strengthen how the town manages governance volunteers and establishes the framework that is missing for the operational activities. At the same time, it is designed to support and sustain the strong volunteer culture that already exists. And I also want to mention that taxpayer-funded staff time is a finite public resource. Without consistent standards, that time gets consumed managing uncertainty case by case. Clear, repeatable processes can replace that ad hoc judgment situation we've found ourselves in, better supporting all volunteer programs and enabling the town to pursue the volunteer-related priorities in the town plan efficiently and effectively, and also ensure that public resources are used where they matter most. Next slide. The fun stuff, not really. The regulatory reality is really the driver why this policy is 31 pages long. What is not widely understood is the regulatory environment that municipalities operate in and the town's heightened duty of care across all of it. Volunteer activity sits within a complex web of legal, safety, environmental, and ethical obligations, some of which apply directly to volunteers and other that govern how the town must structure and oversee volunteer activities. Examples include occupational safety standards, federal labor law requirements that govern how volunteer relationships are structured, child labor laws and mandatory reporting obligations, ADA accessibility, and much more. It also includes environmental regulations that apply directly to our stewardship work. Examples include Act 250, wetlands protection, watershed rules, and erosion control requirements. Even a tree planting event requires review by staff. We have to consider stormwater impacts, soil conditions, proximity to wetlands, and ongoing maintenance obligations. What are those trees going to have for maintenance as they get larger? Where are they planted? Are they planted near gas lines or other areas? So there's a lot that goes behind thinking through these activities. Additional regulation includes state ethics requirements, harassment prevention, data privacy, emergency planning, background checks, and insurance considerations. These are not bureaucratic hurdles that the town is creating. These are regulatory obligations that apply to us. Every volunteer activity that the town supports sits somewhere in this regulatory landscape, and without a clear framework, staff and volunteers may approach these requirements inconsistently and sometimes not at all, which can create a real risk. And thank you, Eric. What this policy does. At its core, this policy replaces case-by-case judgment calls and keeps volunteer activities compliant with a consistent framework designed to support volunteers, equip staff, and protect the town. One of the key ways it does it is by distinguishing between the two types of volunteers. So we have governance volunteers who include appointed members of governing bodies and other appointed positions such as our tree warden. They serve in official capacities within the town's governance structure. In some cases, such as the Development Review Board, they perform quasi-judicial functions that directly affect public trust. In others, they provide recommendations that inform your decisions. This draft policy establishes clear expectations for conduct and participation and provides the Select Board with consistent criteria to guide decisions such as reappointment or how to respond to concerns when they arise. Operational volunteers support programs, events, stewardship, and program-based activities. While these efforts are generally staff-led, the policy ensures there is a clear pathway for volunteers to bring forward ideas, and they do. They bring forward wonderful ideas. Staff remain responsible, though, for coordinating, vetting, and supervising activities to ensure safety, compliance, and fairness, and the policy provides a consistent framework to support those decisions. It also creates clear pathways for youth participation and encouraging youth involvement while meeting the town's obligation to protect minors. Across both categories, the policy brings together expectations around activity approval, conduct, use of town resources, safety and risk management, youth safeguarding, incident reporting, and conflict of interest. Bringing these elements into one place makes the expectations clearer and easier to navigate for both staff and volunteers. And because volunteers represent the town publicly, those expectations matter for maintaining the town's reputation and community trust. Next slide, please. How it was developed. So this policy reflects years of careful and deliberate work. Between 2022 and 2025, staff documented volunteer activities, heard challenges, and also documented incidents while developing practical tools such as waivers, approval processes, and supervision standards. These were informed by legal, insurance, and risk management partners. In spring 2025, we conducted a comprehensive inventory of volunteer activity across the entire organization, followed by research into best practices. Policy drafting began in fall 2025 and went through multiple rounds of revision to balance flexibility, compliance, and operational practicality. In March, the full draft was shared with, actually I skipped in February. One of the first drafts was reviewed by Eric. And then in March, the full draft was shared with department heads and every staff member that has any interaction with volunteers. We really wanted to make sure it was inclusive of everybody's feedback. And we also included departments that have established programs such as recreation and the library, and they reviewed it and they were completely comfortable with the framework. The feedback received from staff and from department heads has been incorporated, and then legal review also has taken place. The depth of the process reflects how seriously staff have taken the responsibility of getting this right. This policy exists for 3 reasons. For volunteers, so they can serve with confidence, knowing what is expected from them, that their programs are well supported, and that the town is committed to receiving their contribution as thoughtfully and responsibly as they give their time and energy. For staff, so they can support and manage with clarity with a consistent framework that replaces ad hoc judgment calls and gives them the authority to make professional decisions on solid footing. For the town, including the select board, so it can fulfill its obligations responsibly, protecting Williston legally, financially, and reputationally, while sustaining the strong volunteer culture this community has built over generations. The volunteers of Williston give something this community could not do without, and this policy is our commitment to honor and support that. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the board?
Mine's a bit specific to
Okay.
youth specifically. It's specific.
Yep.
Okay. So obviously, in working with youth, I noted that there's a requirement to have a town staff present when youth are involved. Is that my understanding of that item?
It depends on the activity. So
Okay.
for instance, the recreation department already has a lot of infrastructure built in how to manage youth activities. So it will not require that.
Okay.
If we were to enter an MOU with, say, the Scouts organization, they're very trained in how to manage youth volunteers. For operational activities, it would really depend. So you'll notice that I try to think of a more efficient way to explain it, but structured programs with minimal supervision or what have you. Really what that might look like is like a Weed Warriors program where a family could go out on a identified day and, as a family go and do some of these activities. In terms of volunteers though, for some of the operational activities, it does not currently support volunteers leading youth volunteers.
Okay. So without the presence of family members, youth volunteer, or with a third-party organization managing it, town staff wouldn't be directly.
Staff would be
present. There, yeah. But they wouldn't be the only supervising for the youth. Is that?
I think that, yeah.
Okay. I just, my concern would be, that, if that were to have been the case, I would want to make sure that mandated reporting training was taking place. I still think that anytime youth are involved, that mandated reporter training should occur. It's free, it's online, it's 2 hours.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's part of this framework is to ensure that we're properly managing those activities.
I think that kind of strikes on one of the things I was just struggling with, and thank you for doing this, Erin. I could barely read the whole thing. I can't imagine spending years putting this together. But if a program's run through the rec department, it's okay. If it's not okay. That really read very clearly to me for youth. And so if somebody wanted to teach a gardening class, they couldn't do it unless they go to the rec department, and then the rec department would say, sure, you could do it. And you can tell me that there's a whole lot of training. I'd have to see it. I think it's.
Yeah, and I think teaching's a little bit different. So we're talking about volunteerism.
A volunteer who wants to do a gardening class.
Okay,
right.
Yeah. I mean, we'd have to think through how we could facilitate that, but.
I mean, it said the parent has to be there the whole time. I mean, it's, I work for a school district. I know about youth safety, but.
Yeah.
The kind of the loophole, if it's okay with Todd, you can do it. Otherwise.
It would really have to be a recreation program, though. That's not. The recreation is an established program, so that's really talking about your coaches and the programs that currently exist. So I'm not sure that would necessarily.
They add a lot of camps and new things every year. They don't have everything every year. Just think about it. I'm just throwing out some thoughts that to me seem inconsistent a little bit, or a little bit stifling to interesting opportunities for kids. The other thing that was just sort of a wondering was this policy applies to volunteer activities that occur on town-owned or town-managed property. I assume town-managed property. The only two I could really think of that weren't town-owned but might be town-managed would be trails that go through other people's property and the property that really belongs to the school district that several people in town seem to think belong to them. But have we talked to the school district, and they're okay with giving up their rights to make decisions about their own property?
So the school district had been aware that we were working on this, and really, they have left it to the town to determine how to manage volunteerism and those type of activities. So if there was an activity that the school was sponsoring and that they were doing on their own property, that would be one thing. They could manage it how they chose to manage it. But in terms of volunteer activities that the town is overseeing on school property, yes, that is included here. And the school has chosen, we've asked them, we had to identify specifically that this included town-managed activities on other property because of the question that you're raising right now. There was a lot of confusion about how to handle volunteer events that were happening. And as we were navigating that, the school really left it to us to determine how to do that.
Well, I'll have that conversation with Gary, but if it's, I guess it's a little redundant then. If it's a town program, it clearly falls under the town rules, no matter where it's.
Right.
If it was on private property, it would still be a town, right? So I find the calling out town-managed property, if it's not a town event, that's not necessarily the town's business, so I want to think about it.
Yeah, let me make sure I'm understanding that correctly too. I'll take a note and make sure that I'm, that's clear.
You know, as I was reading through this, I kept going through my head, it's like, how about the people who watch the bird boxes, or, and it kind of really, I did really bump on all these activities that happen outdoors, and you can't say I'm doing it on Saturday because Saturday might pour rain and you want to move it to Sunday. Or you might have over 6 weeks, we're going to be doing whatever, watching the birds.
Yeah.
You know, and we don't know what days it's going to be because it has to be a certain temperature and not overcast or something, right? I don't know a lot about birds, obviously. But is there room in here for a program that is not date and time specific? And after we get that, we'll get to the all contentious, how do you sign a waiver if you don't know what the date is?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the bird or Nest Watch. Their waivers actually came in today. And so what we did with that group is we did make it very flexible. As long as we also consulted with Catamount Outdoor Family Center, because as you know, they manage the trails, and there had been some conflict between activities happening when trails were closed. And so with some kind of parameters, that group really does do their volunteerism on their time. And they sign one seasonal waiver that's just very clear, that outlines the scope, the tools they can use, safety precautions, and that kind of thing. So yes, this policy supports trying to really respond to the type of activity that's happening and try to make it, you know, we have to think about a lot of things, as you heard in my presentation, like make sure we're checking all the boxes, but also try to make it as flexible as we can so that people can volunteer freely and not feel like they are overburdened in bureaucracy. It took some time to get there. You're going to hear it. I mean, the waiver system was not perfect. It kind of was build the plane while you're flying. And we did have a lot of bumps as we did that, but I think it's in a really good place.
Do you want to talk about the waivers before someone gets up and talks about it for you?
I mean, sure. Do you have a specific question?
No, I mean, I think that we'd heard a lot in the past about it being very burdensome, that there's a 2-page single space thing that no one reads and they have to sign it that day or whatever.
Yeah. So one of the, to clarify the waiver form, it's actually kind of 2 forms, but combined into one. So you have your standard waiver template that says that, you know I'm not getting paid, and all the very standard legal jargon that was provided to us by Passive. And then the top of that waiver form is really the scope, and it talks about scope of work, location and timing of the activity, a description of the activity, safety risks, and then guidelines on safety, you know, for some of the outdoor activities, trying to wear long sleeve clothes if you're removing or plants that can irritate your skin, that type of thing. So the waiver is really kind of our communication tool. This is what the activity is, when it's happening, where it's happening, safety precautions, and then the bottom part is the waiver. And then the second page is just contact information in case something were to happen, and that's pretty standard practice, where you make sure that you have somebody that if there were something to happen to the volunteer that you could contact. So that's the waiver. And we try for our volunteers who are really active and are doing a lot of the same kind of activities, we try to really just do the seasonal waiver.
So the Nest Watch folks don't have to do this every time they go out?
Nope, they sign one waiver at the beginning of the season, and I think theirs carries them from this month through October.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments from the board?
I think this is great. I just really would love to see some sort of way for, with youth volunteering, that there could be someone leading a group of youth without a town staff, like akin to the coach and players
Yep.
dynamic for the rec department. I mean, it feels like if we're already doing it in one department, we could theoretically figure out how to have a group of approved facilitators and perhaps some training that could be required.
I absolutely hear you. And it is really making sure that we build that kind of the training and understand like the background check process, and really have everything established before we do that, but it absolutely is a goal. And we try to make a pathway for that to happen. There's some exceptions that the manager's office can do. For instance, even if an activity is very low risk, you know, tree watering or whatever, like we can waive the waiver requirement. And that I do anticipate too, however this policy shapes up, you know, after the first year, there'll be some things that we learned and that we can improve. And we'll have it as a goal maybe that by then we can accommodate those kind of programs that you're talking about.
I think you will have to maybe evolve into, like, it seems like, well, these are established programs through our departments and these are not, but I bet that there's a lot of overlap that will need to be, well,
Yeah.
that we didn't really think that was an established program and you need to do the waivers, but
Right.
because we keep evolving and changing, so.
Right.
But that's probably something you could work through as you go.
In the meantime, we're really looking for options that we can ensure that youth can volunteer and participate. Like I said, we are hoping to have programs where families can go, and Essex, for instance, has like an Adopt a Trail program, and so you can sign up and maintain that trail for the season. And I mean, that would be a great fun way for families to really get engaged and do some relatively low risk activities. And then finding staff opportunities where we can provide those while we're also trying to establish, you know, a more sophisticated framework to have the kind of youth options that you're talking about.
In terms of the waiver process, obviously there's the physical paper waivers. Are we adopting or developing a way to do that online ahead of the activity?
Yeah, so our priority right now is really we've got to get our website updated. There's a brand new website that's just sitting there built, and then we just haven't had the capacity to get there. Because right now we don't have the tools to really make that easy. I know that there are other tools that we could probably purchase or what have you, but we're just not there. It would be easy for us too to try to have like a really easy online form. Another piece that I see becoming more sophisticated is right now a lot of volunteer activities are happening kind of ad hoc in established groups that have been doing it over time. We want to get to a place where we're better advertising opportunities. So for instance, our senior conservation planners working on, you know, some really great programs that hopefully will come up where they're being advertised at Front Porch Forum, trying to recruit a lot of people to come. Like, you know, Green Up Day is a huge success. That's a state volunteer program, but something, you know, that we can start with a little bit more planning, having a bigger impact. So those type of activities too, where we're advertising it and we can just put a waiver up and it says what activity are you participating in, then that waiver could just be signed online, but we have to get there.
I was thinking about the Easter egg hunt. Is everyone in the Rotary going to have to sign a form to do their own Easter egg hunt because it's on town property, which is really school property?
Yeah.
Those are the kind of things.
I'll put it on my list. You may have to.
Yeah. I'm serious. There's no reason,
Yeah.
you can't just say, okay, if it's Rotary, but you can't do it if you're, Jean's nonprofit.
Right, and those are kind of, that's also a reason why we have the MOU pathway too, so that, we could just have a simple agreement with Rotary that identifies certain volunteer activities that are taking place for the year and just agrees that they're, taking necessary precautions to keep them safe and then they're the ones that are managing those volunteer activities.
And a little bit to Ellie's point about youth, it's like there's a big difference between having a 7-year-old, doing something and having a 17-year-old doing something. I'm thinking the library book sale, there's a lot of teenagers who volunteer for that.
Right.
Their mother has to be there the whole time. That could be challenging. And it's a once-a-year thing, so it's not, So I think I would like to see, and if you're going to tell me that's something we can evolve into, but there's a big difference between 17 and 7. And
Absolutely.
There's something we can do for high school students who get hours in or whatever. I would like to see a little more flexibility for someone at that age.
Absolutely, I totally agree. And it's interesting, I've looked to the Boy Scouts a lot, or excuse me, the Scouts of America, because they've been doing this for a really long time. So they've been managing youth volunteers. And I had to stop looking at their information because their managing of volunteer activities was 82 pages long. And then they had all these guidelines, and I didn't want to get in the weeds of how to do that. But, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just need time to kind of look and see what's out there. But, for example, they have a tool chart, so it tells you what tools the scouts can use by certain ages and what training that they had to have done. We're not there. We're hopefully going to be adopting a framework so we can start doing these type of things. But there's models out there that'll allow us to be kind of sophisticated in how we offer these opportunities for youth.
I'm out of questions. It's all been a long night.
Yeah, I know. So are there other comments from the board? Okay. Chapin, you've been sitting quietly. I know you're very...
Remarks if you'd like them.
Yeah, I would.
Thank you. Some of the questions you had are ones that I've had in conversations with Aaron and with Eric and others. And Aaron's response just now were more encouraging than I have felt when I had those conversations. And for instance, I've offered to be vetted every which way. I am a school stub, and so I'm vetted by the school. I offered to be an employee just during those hours. I have youth there, and all of the answers to all of that was no, 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 no. So I have found total block to date. I want to talk about this book called Abundance. It's by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson, and it describes the situation we have with conservation volunteering. And I'm going to talk mostly about conservation volunteering, which is what's called operational volunteering. Thank you.
Chapin, can
I was getting ready to
Chapin,
take
how long do you think you're going to be? I mean, I don't want to...
As long as I need to. I was told I was not able to see any drafts or participate until you received it.
Yep.
And this is my chance to speak.
True, but we're not going to adopt it tonight. just
No.
so you know. Yeah, we're not.
I am told that this is when I should make my comments. Aaron invited me to make my comments tonight.
Okay.
So
All
I
right,
have
just-
my comments prepared. I'm going to make
Please,
them.
just keep track of the time.
They are written.
Okay.
So
All right.
they are a
Go
certain
ahead.
length and they will not get longer.
Okay, great. Thank you.
This book describes the situation we have with conservation volunteering in Williston. The large point is that the cumulative regulations and administrative requirements can hobble work towards goals that the government and the community it serves. Here are some quotes. When the government adds the right number of goals, standards, and rules, much can be accomplished. When it adds too many, the project can collapse under its own weight. Another, each individual decision is rational, the collective consequences are maddening. And I think these may resonate with you. If you think about, for instance, affordable housing or housing in general in Vermont, the layers of regulation that interact and cause delays and costs, if in fact they are each for a good reason, but that cumulatively they bog it down and hobble the good effects that people are going for. You can look at our, we're coming up on 2.5 years since we lost the Allenbrook Boardwalk Bridge. Right now there's a conflict between regulations about bats that prevents us from doing things in the summer, and wetland work, which prevents us from doing things after October 1st. They're both good rules, but they conflict and they put us in a bind where either we're going to do nothing or we're going to do something in the spring, which is the worst time overall for the ecology of the area. So that's my point. That's the backdrop of my comments. First of all, appreciation. Despite my critical comments, I know this document was created with good intent, and I respect Aaron and other staff who created it. They did a great job with what they were directed to do. It feels to me as though they were directed to spare no administrative requirement or cost to limit risk and to limit volunteering risk to the exclusion of other goals. I support much of what is in this policy. That includes all that's said about governance appointees, officers, outside organizations, about town staff when they volunteer in other communities. It was nice to see that added. It includes Article 8 on background checks. I support that. I support training for reporting, mandatory reporting. And I support Articles 13, 14, and 15. They're generally good frameworks for the administrative side of things. One technical suggestion is that putting governance appointees and officers to the town who don't have much in common with operational volunteers, who are generally the volunteers who are doing physical work, they have separate paragraphs and sections, but there's some areas that apply to both, a few areas. Putting them all in the same document makes the document long and harder for either group to use effectively, but that's not why I'm here. My concerns are for the operational volunteers because these policies are administration-heavy, restrictive, and extremely risk-averse. And for these reasons, they will not meet the aspirations stated in Article 1 to have, quote, flexible processes and, quote, collaborative spirit of volunteering brings to public service. The following examples refer only to what is called operational volunteer activity for conservation environmental work and are in page number order, so you can follow my references in the document if you wish. Article 2, Section B, number 3, Section B, top of page 5. Note that's indicative of being administrative heavy that we have to go that deep into the structure. Quote, event and project-based volunteers lists trail work and stewardship activities as the types of activities, which are the types of activities I've led over the years. We have been hamstrung by the town's attempt to make these activities event-based with specific dates. Ranges of dates have occasionally happened, but they have not been the rule. For example, one should pull parsnip when the sun is not out and preferably after a rain so the roots let go of the soil more easily. Having specific events to pull parsnip constrains the activity unreasonably and actually leads to less safe practices like doing the work when it's approved for, not when it's safest. And I hope you see how these relate back to good intention. On the other hand, continuing this example, parsnip pulling happens after the plants have grown a flowering stalk and end when they go to seed, so it occurs from late June to mid-August. I've discussed this kind of cycle with our conservation planners over the years. It's the same kind of regular activity that is called department managed program when it's in the library or in the rec department. Article 3, Section D, near the bottom of page 6, identifies that, quote, the town manager's office serves as the town's central authority for volunteer administration, risk management, safety oversight, and liability coordination. And this document is doing that. But to do these best, one would not have volunteers at all. By definition, they require administration and they present risks, safety concerns, and liability. So who is looking out for the aspirations in Article 1? They are missing in this document. This proposed policy treats volunteers as a problem to be limited, not an asset to be fostered. That's a quote from me. Top of page 7, this itemized list of 10 bullets is all about limiting what volunteers do. It lacks policies for promoting and encouraging volunteering. It's a policy entirely about limiting. There is something about that in Article 5, Section A called bringing forward ideas. This is on page 9. that says, quote, volunteer ideas may come from community members, staff, or through collaboration. The town welcomes proposals for projects or activities that benefit Williston, many of which have grown from community initiative. This is great, but the authorization requirements in Article 5, Section B outline an administrative-heavy process for approving proposals, including warnings that it may take a week just to review a simple, low-risk activity, and several weeks or longer to approve activities involving multiple participants, which is what I do, specialized tools, which is what I do, and youth, which is what I do. The remaining sections of this article, other than, quote, than the emergency volunteer activation part, describe a process that's daunting and certainly not encouraging of those who would like to grow Williston's volunteer opportunities. Part 3, Article 7, Section A on youth, page 15. Quote, volunteer activities involving minors must be designed to prove coordinated and emphasizing overseen by town staff. And supervision must include on-site town staff presence. There is an exception on page 17 for, quote, structured volunteer programs when, quote, a parent or legal guardian is present and directly supervising the youth volunteer for the duration of their participation. Even under that direct supervision of the parent or guardian, quote, youth participation is limited to age-appropriate, that part's fine, low-risk tasks, whoever's judging low risk, within the approved scope. And I would just say this whole thing's about limiting risk, and so I see it limiting severely what kids can do. And right now, there's nothing laid out that kids can do. In the past, this has limited what tools youth can use beyond what is reasonable. Just look at the Boy Scouts trying to do trail maintenance despite having their own insurance. Article 9, page 19, and I'm sorry. Okay. I'm going through all these complaints.
That's great. No, that's good to hear.
Quote, volunteer-owned tools, and I'm just picking some to show to me the tone of this, how it treats volunteering entirely from the limiting side. Volunteer-owned tools may be used with town approval. It means that I have to get permission to bring my own snips, loppers, shovels, buckets, etc. when volunteering. I've encountered an analogous situation myself when someone showed up to pull parsnip wearing short sleeves, and I was in charge. They had gloves and were experienced and had signed the waiver, but I was uncomfortable with their bare arms doing the activity. So I recognize that these situations can arise. However, a less constricting way to respond to what I assume is the underlying concern would be to say that the activity leader, whether a town employee or I'd hope at some point volunteer, could deny use of a tool they deemed unsafe. Give them discretion to say you can't use that. Don't say up front you can't use it if it's not pre-approved. You can't bring your own tool if it's not pre-approved. And I'd make it even broader. I'd cover clothing as well. If they didn't come with closed-toed shoes or something, the person who's leading the activity should be able to say no, and you shouldn't have to write that into every waiver that somebody signs. Article 9, next to last bullet, still on page 19, about activities and tools that might be curtailed due to things like, quote, insurance guidance, which seems backwards, and ends with this, quote, in certain circumstances, such tools or activities may be prohibited. This vague warning does not bode well. For 5 years, I held a town-sponsored pesticide license so I could stump treat invasive woody plants with herbicide, but I was not allowed to use it last year. Is this the kind of arbitrary restriction that is in the future too? Part 4, Article 11, Section B, page 21, quote, volunteers may use town equipment only as part of an approved volunteer activity and as authorized by town staff. To me, this is administrative overreach. I've borrowed the town's weed wrench many times to pull invasive plants, especially with students at our schools. To have a volunteer come and use the town's weed wrench for a day, pulling invasive plants on town land, and not have a chance to borrow it for use on their own property, should they wish, does not foster, quote, a welcoming environment that we talk about. If it were the library of things at the Dorothy Elling Memorial Library, one could just check it out. If the town is concerned with liability when somebody uses a town tool, post a waiver as part of the sign-out sheet. But saying a volunteer can bring their own tools only when the town approves and cannot ever use a town tool for other uses is overreach that undermines the statement at the bottom of page 21 that says, quote, the town seeks to foster a respectful, inclusive, and welcoming environment for all participants. Note that the town itself is a participant, and it is basically saying, you can't do this, and it's no. These are examples of why this policy draft restricts and discourages volunteering and does not encourage it. It will continue to result in two-page, single-space waiver forms that are performative. When volunteers show up, they say, "Where do I sign?" and are interested in the job at hand, not the town's instructions on details like their responsibility to carry a water bottle and drink frequently. These waivers are paternalistic at best. They don't feel respectful when you have to sign something that says those things. All the time, effort, and paper that goes into constraining what can be done in legalese and seemingly intended to further absolve the town from any liability, even though the volunteer signs away that responsibility to begin with. All that time and effort went in. So I have not commented on the department-managed volunteer programs. That would be Parks and Rec and Library. Because those sections, Article 4, et cetera, seem to have a more reasonable balance between safety and encouragement, between liability and cooperation. They apply to Parks, Rec, and Library, yeah. The activities I used to lead at the direction and oversight of the Conservation Commission and Conservation Planner meet the bullets describing department-managed volunteer programs on page 8, but have been treated as though each one were a special event. This has severely constricted what I've been able to do as a volunteer and volunteer leader. The fact those types of activities are not treated as department-managed in this document is discouraging, given what I've put into trying to make it established. The town of Williston has severely restricted the kinds of activities I was leading prior to the effort to develop this policy, which I assume was 3 years ago, because that's when youth were first excluded from events I was leading, which I found out because I was given a new form that said I'm 18. My primary goal in volunteering for the town is to help residents participate in their environment positively and for our youth to gain a land ethic through working with the soil and with plants, and in doing so, not only to understand our local ecology better, but to have a personal investment in the health of the ecosystem they are, and we are a part of. I'm old. I'm 75, to be exact, and the town has missed out on much I would have done these past few years. The increasing restrictions and lack of direct communication has taken a toll on my own mental health. I've moved on to focus on volunteering with schools and private landowners where I can be more effective. I will still participate as a town volunteer. I'll be planting trees a week from Saturday with Dave Maroney on May 15th. Sadly, it was delayed because of the waiver process and can't have youth, even though it's next to Ellenbrook School. But I will not be putting myself through the strain of proposing or leading activities the town will not support positively. If you've been wondering what kind of encouraging positive things the town volunteer policy could include, that I've sort of not been saying, for instance, I wanted to have families adopt groups of planted trees at Tree Island, called Abazi Menahani, near the Ellenbrook School. They would participate in monitoring and caring for the trees, much as the Williston and Bloom group cares for flower beds. Can you imagine trying to run that proposal through the policies in this draft document? For instance, I wanted to establish a Weed Warriors program modeled on those in area towns. Wouldn't it be nice if these policies laid out a basis for such a program rather than focusing so much on limiting risks? I recently soft launched such a program on private properties this year, and hopefully it will foster the kind of volunteering environment that I envision. I close with a reminder that active volunteering, such as trail maintenance and conservation work, presents risks. If the town treats it only as a risk to be limited or avoided, it will continue to languish. I'd like to see us do better than that. Unfortunately, I'm burned out trying to make that happen through the town and have chosen to put my focus elsewhere. So why am I commenting? I've been asked to by people I respect, including Aaron. And the problem of risk aversion by the town goes beyond volunteering. So there's a larger lesson here. I don't have the capacity to play much of a role in crafting changes to this draft policy, but I will cheer you on if you do. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
I'll stay for a second in case somebody wanted to follow up.
Any questions for Chapin? No. Okay.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
Hi there, Reed Carr. I'm a member of the Conservation Commission and also somebody who's volunteered over the years here in Vermont since returning in 2016. And I had prepared comments, but I'm going to shorten them extensively for you, which I'm sure will help with the agenda. Before I begin, I want to be clear that clearly a ton of effort has gone into this. There's a lot of good research here on what can be done to limit risks. and I can tell that the draft is pretty solid. My concerns are this. I think process is really important. Anytime we're going to create a policy to govern something, we should be engaging the stakeholder groups that it impacts up front and getting input. So in this case, this is the first opportunity as a volunteer that I've had to come and share my experiences, and we have like a half-baked policy. So to me, we needed to do that up front. I echo what I heard my father Chapin saying there, that what I see in the policy is great ways to eliminate risk, but not manages to accept some risk and then proactively manage it, which is how you get the most out of town volunteers. From a conservation lens, ecologically, we face multiple disasters that are happening at the same time. Biodiversity loss, climate change, invasions of invasive species, and there are other things as well, habitat loss. And when we look at that, we're doing this, trying to face this at the time when budgets are short and staff time is short. And so now is the time that we need to really massively increase the amount of volunteering that's going on if we're going to meet our town goals, and we can't have overly arduous processes to get there. I can't stress enough the importance of having pathways for youth to participate. These people are going to be our future teachers, right? They're going to be our future select people. They're going to be our future landowners who are managing their own property. And we have an opportunity right now to instill a pride in our town, a pride in the land that we steward, and also in our community here. And the more that I work with youth, the more that I'm hearing from them that they're really yearning for a sense of belonging and purpose, a sense of usefulness, and opportunities to volunteer, deliver on all those things. And finally, I would propose that there are lots of ways that moving forward, this policy can be adapted to work better. I really appreciated the comments about youth being important, about not all youth being equal. There has to be some variation. Otherwise, if we have one-size-fits-all policy, we're going to end up cutting people out effectively of being able to do what they need to do. And I will leave it there because I know you're ready to move on. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, I can take questions.
Thanks, Reed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Laura Meyer. Hi, how are you? Thank you for your work on this. I just had a very quick, I wanted to talk about the restriction on chemical herbicides. Mm-hmm. And I understand that insurance companies are probably why you're not able to allow that. Is that true? Oh, I see. Okay, so I think that some people, and I'm happy to sit down with you and talk about it, don't understand how safe cut stump treatment is, and how it is used by many conservation groups, and even at the state allows certified herbicide, people who are certified to do cut stump treatment, to allow volunteers to do it with them, as long as they're overseeing them. So, and I just wanted to ask that there isn't such a restriction, that maybe that sometimes there is, like maybe spraying foliar spray would be something that you would say, yeah, that we'd rather you'd not do that, but something a little safer like cut stump treatment you would. So that's all I wanted to say. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I provide just a little bit of background on that? Because it actually is a wonderful example of, oh, did I?
No, you were off, now you're back on.
That's a wonderful example. So we have had some licensed herbicide volunteers, and we had to pause the activity, not because of the town's insurance, not because the town had concerns about them applying herbicide. It actually happened organically in that part of the process of the waiver is that I work with the staff member who's supporting that activity, and then we just try to do our due diligence and figure out the best instructions that we can provide for those activities. It was the first year that we had really been looking into everything in depth, and when I was working on the waiver for allowing the herbicide application, fully intending to allow that activity, I reached out to the state because the location that it was being applied at was near a school. So I reached out to the state and said, hey, here's the scenario. We have wonderful volunteers who are licensed to apply herbicide, but I want to include in here any special parameters or considerations that need to be taken into account because of the placement of where it's located. And through that process, the state then identified that we were out of compliance and that annually we are supposed to, as a municipality, apply for a permit to be able to apply those, the herbicide. And the annual process happens in April. We were in, I think, May. We were trying to figure out ways to accommodate it. It became very frustrating for the volunteers who were licensed to do it, but we, knowing that we didn't have the appropriate permit to proceed with that activity, decided not to allow it. And that is actually what happened with the herbicide application. And it's great to highlight exactly why staff need to be involved, need to review these activities. Again, it's not the town's bureaucracy and regulation that we're really managing. It's all of the other factors that we have to consider. So
Are you saying you got that fixed now?
we didn't, we don't have any licensed herbicide applicators anymore. So, no, our conservation our senior conservation planner was prepared to go forward and do the necessary, very similar to the Ellenbrook. You know, you find out these kind of regulations, and it unfortunately ties our hands, and we have to pause.
To me, this is another example. Everything Aaron said is true, although I didn't know it at the time. I just knew I wasn't getting my waiver, I wasn't getting my waiver, I wasn't getting my waiver, and yes, it's coming. That's what I thought. When we discovered that that we were supposed to, as a town, do an annual process to say that we were going to use herbicide on school land, we could have then submitted it late, and usually you would be forgiven if you have tried to catch up because you made an honest mistake. But instead, we said, no, we're just not going to do it. And to me, that's the risk avoidance to the beyond what's reasonable. In other words, if you made an honest mistake, you didn't file some paperwork, and then you try to remediate it, and it's just a piece of paperwork, it's not that you were doing anything wrong. To me, that's one of the problem. Part of the problem.
Well, I understand the whole risk thing, and you could probably get 100 examples. I understand what you're saying, Chapin, I totally understand. I've been where Aaron is too, but I do think that this whole invasive species management is going to be one of the big problems of the next decade, especially as we keep adding conserved land. And I think that I'd like the idea of finding a way to make that into the one the library and the rec center has. Like, it's a program that's being managed by a department. And so we fall into that, because there's no way you can just ad hoc keep up with these gigantic problems in our woods and woodlands. So again, maybe that's on the list along with the youth that we got to figure out and pass too. But I know the Catamount Outdoor Family Center, speaking of which, they do invasive species management out there. I mean, their board does, and that's on our property, so we probably have to make sure that that's covered appropriately. But yes, that's going to be a problem. It's going to be a bigger and bigger problem if we don't get ahead of it. Got to figure it out.
Absolutely.
Kevin Thorley, speaking as a resident, but also on the Energy Committee. We've talked a lot about risk. Chapin called out risk a lot, and I certainly appreciate the town's need to protect itself and thereby protect the citizens from certain kinds of risk. A few years ago, the Energy Committee stood up a program called the EV Ambassador Program. It was a way to connect residents who were interested in an electric vehicle with people who already had them. And we went through the process as a committee, working with legal counsel, and the answers that came back were we could do this, but people could not meet up in person. I'm not going to go any further into that, but I'm calling that out because I think one of the questions we should ask as a town, as a select board, is if the advice we're getting aligns with our values. There are towns who do these things. They must have legal counsel. Their legal counsel advises them differently than ours may advise us. And with all of this, I know the town's put in a ton of work, Aaron and everybody else. I just think we should be asking if the advice we're getting aligns with our town values, and if the degree of risk adversity that we have is appropriate for the kind of town we want to be. I don't think the problem is necessarily in the policies we're drafting. I think you have to go a step back and look at the inputs that we're getting to those policies. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did you want to make a comment?
I did. I did want to say I just want to say that, so I have volunteered with Chapin. I've, done invasive species removal and planted trees. And to me, Chapin is a very reasonable, very intelligent, very informed, very capable person. And to me, I was like, wow, we're so lucky as a town that he is giving all of this, his time and expertise to, make this town a really better place. And I have been dismayed to see his hands tied, or, he just, you can't do this, you can't do that. And, I can appreciate running a town, it's very complicated, and, you need to do things, follow certain protocol. But I think that that can just become cumbersome, and what has happened is a loss for Williston, I think. Not appreciating the amazing gifts that Chapin is just offering. So I would hope that Williston would say, yes, we have to do this, but also, I get it, that, this is a really competent person who's giving us this really great thing. Let's see how we can work with him and try to stop this invasive species. Sometimes you have to wait a whole season, you've lost. So, anyway.
I didn't think I still did.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's Marcy.
Sorry.
Okay. Just go ahead. Unless, if you, please
Danielle
be brief.
Doucette. I'd like to just echo what Marcy had to say. I'm here to support Chapin's work. When Chapin first told me about opportunity for youth to go out and dig holes and plant trees, I was like, yes, I'm sending my son. He's helping you right now. That was 4 years ago, and he hasn't been able to help since because of the fact that Chapin has not been able to get the waiver to allow my 17-year-old now to go out and just, dig in the dirt. So I urge expediency in getting a town plan where you can get the youth back into places where if they're not in scouts or if they're not in the library, where they can also give back.
Thank you. Quickly.
I'm going to be super quick. And Ted, the Celtics already lost. Where are you going to go, bud?
I'm here since 6.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I respect that. So one thing I just want to bring up, if we're going to give rec and library this kind of protected, elevated status, is there any way that we could provide on-ramps to other groups to reach said protected status? Mm-hmm. And then for youth, I would love to see an on-ramp where their participation in projects can lower the amount of adult supervision that they need. So if one goes out and they participate in the same activity 10 times, then can we say that they're trained enough or responsible enough that they can be there without their parent supervision. Obviously, you still need an adult in the space, but kind of ease those burdens as they get more used to the activities that they're taking part in. And the other thing is, I would love a registry of experts and volunteers in the community. So that way, as people bring up new ideas for events, they have a short list of people that are vetted by the city that they can then incorporate into their events to help get around some of these legal loopholes that they need in terms of youth management and attendance.
Good idea.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So where do we go from here?
Where would you like us to look?
Well, we gave a couple of things. I thought this was just sort of an input.
I would say good feedback and discussion from everyone this evening. It's it's the first reading of this policy, so hearing feedback from the board, things raised by the community. I think Aaron's done an outstanding job in working through this. There's so many pieces and layers and complexity to it, and where Williston is as a community right now, it's we talk about the growing pains and the complexity and the balance, and it's trying to strike all those things in the right manner and fashion. And in the end, the select board as the policymakers have to make some calls on where those things lie. And at the staff level, we want to make sure we raise all those and raise an approach that we feel is appropriate to take to you to start those conversations. So I think what we do now is we'll get that, work on that feedback and bring us back to the board with identifying some of these items and continue the conversation.
Okay.
What do you think, Aaron?
Yeah, I want to just understand clearly, though, exactly which sections, trying to better establish a pathway for youth programs.
As a mandated reporter myself, I think that, and with other, I've worked with other organizations too, I think that is very often the pathway to having somebody lead youth volunteers. So I think it would be worth exploring that as an option, having a specific training pathway for citizen volunteers to lead youth with a very explicit set of guidelines, but maybe some defined parameters around what activities those are. It's not, let's see how that pathway works. But I think that, there is a pathway there to do that. Other organizations are doing that. Other towns are doing that. And I think that does, again, remove us, still have the waiver signed, still have all of these things signed, parents are understanding what their children are doing, but, and the volunteers are very trained, but I would like to see us get to that point in the initial draft where there is a pathway for that to happen.
Yeah, I agree. I think I would have a hard time approving this, especially around the youth volunteering, the way it's written.
Specifically that volunteers cannot lead the youth volunteers.
And that their mother has to be there with them the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a 17-year-old,
Or even younger.
Yes.
That's a big concern for me.
Yeah.
I like the concept of on-ramps
Yeah.
for entities, and that would dovetail what Greta was saying about, training and mandated reporting type concepts as part of that. I think if we could create a structure where entities are, kind of qualify to be the ones that are in charge of volunteers, just like the rec department. Maybe not just like, but similar to. Then I think that would be a big step.
And I'd be interested if there's a way to have the conservation organization have its privileged status for certain projects as well.
Yeah, I will share with you in the designing of the policy, trying to think through, I think easily we can have staff-led youth volunteer programs, perhaps that parents are not present at. Having volunteers be responsible for those programs, I'll have to do a lot more research, even looking at schools. Like a lot of schools don't let volunteers manage youth activities. even, yeah, so I was struggling finding kind of the framework to help support that specifically, and I'll continue to do that. I think, but definitely, I think staff-led, without the parents available, there's a lot of,
Well, you can say that, Erin, but we don't have that many staff. Who on our staff is gonna have the time to go do a 4-hour tree planting?
right, yeah,
Right,
and
so.
I hear you.
And I mean, schools are more of a finite location too, so I mean, it's probably easier for them to have a staff person. There might be other models besides schools. that
Yeah,
I can look
no,
at.
I'll definitely do some further digging and try to find those models.
All right. Okay,
All right, great,
all right.
thank you.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you for all your effort. It's hard to make a presentation like this and then have people jump up.
The feedback is important.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so thank you very much. That would bring us to our next agenda item. The Local Emergency Management Plan 2026.
This is a doozy, everybody, so you may want to stay. It actually is. It's a lot of work and a lot of effort. I do very much appreciate it.
You're dug yourself a hole.
It is. It's very vital.
So the board's got a copy of this. We're required to update this plan annually. Chief Collette serves as our emergency management director. The board has a copy of this plan.
Yeah.
Certainly the chief's here to answer any questions you may have.
Were there any substantive changes from years past?
If I can open by saying, I just want to publicly acknowledge Jerry Russin, our administrative assistant, who took the burden of this document on. And when I assigned him this, or asked if he could take this on, he did it so completely thoroughly that when I was proofing it, I said, oh, wow. So to your point, there are no substantive changes.
Okay.
Jerry went the extra mile, and he actually brought in Vermont Emergency Management, the community liaison, Harry Shopman. So Harry sat down with us, and we worked through this, and then Jerry went line by line. So there is some, protected information in here. There's obviously personal phone numbers and all that stuff, so that's why it's not a public document. But no, I think we're in a lot better place for the attention to detail that he put into the document.
Great.
So.
This does represent a substantial amount of work and coordination. It is definitely impressive.
You talk about the public information officer being vacant. How are you handling?
So currently, in the absence of a formal, that resides with myself, so that it could be assigned. So I would just delegate the next person to actually take that role. It would be incident dependent. So right now, every press release you see comes out of my office.
So that's mostly press releases then? Because I'm more worried about in the middle of an incident, you've got better things to worry about than.
And I have a backup plan for that. So I can, like you probably saw, that we did an event on Harvest Lane recently, and that was assigned to the deputy. So the deputy took that role over. So, and we have other staff on board that can take this role on. So it's incident dependent. It would be a fallacy if I just put my name as in the same way, Gene. It's going to be incident dependent.
Yeah.
So.
Have you ever considered having one of your leadership team be the?
So we do have it. The position is vacant.
So is that a hired? I mean, like you.
It's assigned.
It's not a full-time position.
It's a role within the department that is currently vacant.
Okay.
Prescott Nadeau filled that role previously.
Correct. Yep. Okay. So we've advertised it twice, and no, didn't go anywhere.
It's just a super important one. You might want to look at the Williston Town Hall Annex, since it's written down as having showers and generators and food preparation, which seems a little aggressive for the annex.
It has all this.
It does?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, no food preparation?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, who knew? Get 25 people to feed. You can feed them out of the annex kitchen. That's pretty good. Because I don't think it's the same way as this building, which.
No, they've got a larger space in there. In their back.
All right, I stand corrected.
Other questions or comments?
No.
If not, there is a proposed motion.
Move to approve the 2026 Local Emergency Operations Plan.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
There are no nays. The motion carries. The local emergency operation plan is adopted.
Thank you very much.
Thank Gerald on our behalf as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So that would bring us to manager's report.
Yes. Briefly, so Shirley and the team have the finance report through February. We already major changes from January. If you have any questions, Shirley's here this evening. Then to highlight, I share this, but we're really excited for staff news in the fire department too. We've hired Will Moran to be our battalion chief of training and safety. Will comes to us with extensive background in public safety at the local, state, and nonprofit levels. Really excited to welcome him to our department, and he'll be starting late May, early June. He'll be a swearing in. We've got planned, so really excited to have him join our team. And then briefly with a legislative update, a lot of action around local option tax last week in the legislature. If you get the VLCT's legislative update, there's a good breakdown of it this week. Essentially, the Senate was really deadlocked on it. It passed the Senate, this version of the appropriations bill. There's still some back and forth with the House, but really the version out there now is all about the pilot fund surplus and then the share of local option tax and how those things work together. But what passed out of the Senate was saying the municipalities, the split would go to 80-20 instead of 75-25, where we get the larger number. In the event the pilot surplus exceeded $18 million at the end of a fiscal year, so the next fiscal year, hey, you get an extra 5%. The challenge here is the pilot fund has been asked with a lot of money discussions in the legislature about using towards other expenses. So we don't know if, is it ever going to reach $18 million surplus if it keeps being used for other things in state government? So, to be continued. And I'm testifying tomorrow for ways to in Gov Ops about our charter amendment. Send me a note at 4 o'clock today. Hopefully that goes smooth. That's all I have.
I don't envision that being a contentious one.
Let's hope.
Is there other business?
Nothing I have.
Okay. And that would bring us to final thoughts on items from this meeting. Are there any?
Who's taking the lead on our community engagement plan? Do we need a two-person committee, or is it going to be administration, or? Brett is staring at Eric.
I
can bring something to the select board if you'd like me to.
I think Eric and I had a conversation earlier this week. I think it's a tough right now. I originally I think I had envisioned that the chief of police might kind of spearhead a little bit of it with Eric and whatnot. But we're obviously in a state of transition right now with our chief of police. So I think Eric has graciously, and amidst all the other million jobs he is doing, volunteered to kind of reach out to the organization. So and to start that process.
I think it's going to continue to be difficult because I've read the Richmond one, which I think is going to be hard for administration to agree to, and so it's going to be. I think the days of having Eric bring us something is going to be past on this deal.
Well, right. I think I'm more envisioning and reaching out and beginning the actual conversations, and with groups and starting the dialogue rather than bringing us some sort of document, but yeah.
So what Eric's going to bring is more like this is who you're going to meet with?
No.
Yeah, I haven't had a lot of time to think just on process, but I think I would, kind of offer to meet with different stakeholders and just kind of receive their feedback. And certainly our police department's really important in this component, and our chief as well. And
I think fire too. I think would be helpful to have involved. I would love to potentially have representatives from community organizations, if they felt comfortable, come speak with us as select board too. But that's certainly maybe a discussion point we could have and put on an agenda would be to how we would want this structured.
my concern with that is that these are formal meetings.
Right.
I'd
Yeah.
much rather have like a facilitated conversation
Yeah.
than a select board agenda.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Would it make sense to talk about getting a facilitator sooner rather than later?
Yeah, I guess it kind of comes down to what's the outcome the board's looking for. You know, I'm thinking, you know, initially if it's, you know, I can reach out and have some conversations to hear kind of, you know, the pulse of the community, the groups in the community, kind of what, you know, where they are, what their concerns are, what their questions are. And I can get all that information and what do I do with that information?
Yeah.
Right, and I'm thinking we could do that, and we could spend 3 months doing that, but I don't think, from just the last, people reaching out to me over the last week, I don't think the concerns are that different in our community than in other communities, frankly. So do we spend time just getting the information that we already have?
Well, that's why I think it was beneficial to talk to other organizations and see what other communities are doing,
Right.
to see what, you know, so we're not reinventing the wheel, but also, you know, I think it's beneficial to have, you know, firsthand accounts that folks have provided us. You know, I think ultimately what I'm envisioning is, you know, kind of some explicit guidance and expectations for, you know, how our town and police force may, or emergency management in general, may handle situations if they arise, so that, you know, if a situation happens, our police aren't questioning, you know, what they're supposed to be doing. There is an explicit expectation of, you know, of guidance. That's what I was envisioning.
So I think that's also going to involve some research as opposed to just meeting with people.
Absolutely.
Because we just, you know, I've got an inbox full of resources to read right now.
I think that element too, you know, that's a conversation probably with the town attorney.
Absolutely.
The select board, just to kind of understand,
Mhm.
you know, what roles are, what the playing field is on decisions like that for a select board, you know, where the authority lies.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, reaching out to as well to, you know, our state's attorney as well, and to see, you know, would be helpful. I know that she's also been working with the folks in Richmond, and I think, you know, to see where she's at in the process with that as well.
Well, I am more than happy to pass this on to somebody else, but if no one else steps, I think my opinion, we should have a two-person subcommittee to try to wrap their arms around how we want to approach this problem. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think after we saw the turnout tonight, I think there's a sense of urgency by a large group of our community. So they're looking for us to take a position on this. So I'd be happy to join you in that.
Or somebody else. No, I mean, I think it's the right thing to do, and I never suggest something like that without being able to raise my hand and say, I'll do it, but I don't know if I'm really the right person to do this. I know Ellie's very involved in this stuff, I know Greta is too. Ted would love to do it, I know he's very busy. So that would be great, and I will do it if neither one of you.
I mean, I'm happy. I'm involved with several organizations and have contact with lots of groups, so I'm happy to work with Eric and to work with McHugh and to maybe come up with a plan of action.
A plan for an approach. That would be awesome.
So who's doing it?
McHugh and I.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You may want to consider some formal action around that on a future agenda.
Okay.
Check your guidelines.
Sure.
But in the meantime, we can kind of have a discussion.
Start having some
I
conversations.
don't think there's any problem with starting now.
No.
Okay.
Probably a conversation with our public safety folks.
Okay. Are there any other final thoughts? Okay. Hearing none, then we do have more work to do with an executive session, and there is a proposed motion.
It's all you now. Right. I move to find that premature public knowledge regarding a contract negotiation and a labor relations agreement with employees would clearly place the town at a substantial disadvantage, and further move that we enter executive session to discuss a contract negotiation and a labor relations agreement with employees under Title I, Sections 313A1, A, and B, and invite Fire Chief Aaron Collette and Human Resource Director Susan Leonard to join the discussion regarding a labor relations agreement with employees, and invite Town Manager Eric Wells to join both discussions.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
There are no nays. So we are going into executive session. We will not be reconvening in public session, and no formal decisions will be made.